Hello and welcome to the 2019 Emerging Innovations Virtual Summit Special Event. Today's event is brought to you by Actual Tech Media, and thank you so much for joining us on our biggest event of the year, the Emerging Technologies or Emerging Innovations Virtual Summit. My name is David Davis. I'm a partner at Actual Tech Media, and I'm honored to be the moderator on today's event. Now, the IT Virtual Summit event, we only do this a few times a year, and on these special events, we bring in expert keynote presenters. We'll have 3 keynote presenters on today's event, and we give out even more prizes than on our normal events, which is a lot of prizes on our MegaCast and EcoCast event. So you'll notice we've got some really cool keynotes. We have some very cool emerging innovations from a lot of different companies that you'll learn about on today's event, and some very awesome prizes. Now, today's event would not be possible without presenters from Western Digital, Clear Sky Data, Igneous, Gigamon, SaltStack, iLand with Veeam, and KnowBe4. So thank you to today's sponsors. Now, on the Summit event, we've asked our presenters to discuss specifically what makes their solution so innovative, what makes it so unique, how it can help to transform your business and your IT organization and make you and your company much more efficient than ever before. So be on the lookout for those types of presentations, and that's what you'll be learning about on today's event. Now, the goal of these events is to help educate the world of IT professionals, of which I consider myself to be one, about the most innovative enterprise-grade technology solutions available to you today, to help you to learn as much as possible, to get all your questions answered, and do it in one online virtual event quickly and efficiently. You never have to leave your office, never have to leave your couch at home if you're lucky enough to be there. And while you're learning, you'll have a chance to win one of our cool prizes, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, the format for today's event, you'll hear from 7 of the hottest companies in the enterprise technology space. Each presenter will speak for roughly 20 minutes, followed by a live 3 to 5 minute Q&A session where I'll be asking questions from you out there in the audience. So we highly encourage your questions, and we'll be saving those questions for the dedicated Q&A session. We'll be answering some of those throughout the presentations as we have availability, but primarily we'll queue those up for the presenters during the Q&A session. Now, I should note that the schedule is on the bottom of your console. There's an icon there, kind of looks like 3 bars. If you click on that, you'll see the schedule for today's event, and you'll notice that we have 3 keynote interviews from independent experts in enterprise technology, and one of those will kick off here in just a moment. Now, before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do. There's a few things that you need to know about today's event. We'll be giving out 5 MacBook Air laptops, and these are the brand new, awesome MacBook Airs, as well as 6 Amazon $500 gift cards. I'll cover more details on those prizes and the requirements to be eligible for the drawings in just a moment. Now, you should also notice on your console there that you have a questions and answers box. In that questions box, that's where you put in your questions, to say it most obviously. But, you know, we've gotten tons of feedback already from people who say, you know, hello from sunny California, Texas, New Mexico, California, Canada, even around the world. So thank you for those responses. But we also encourage you to put in your questions about enterprise technology, because we have, you know, experts ready to answer those questions. So I encourage you to put in the box right now, what's your greatest technology challenge that you're facing at your company, in your IT organization? And I can have the expert presenters coming up, you know, answer those types of questions for you as well, because we want to make this as educational as possible. Now, during the event, I'll be also asking you a number of poll questions, just like we did in the warm-up for the event, and I appreciate your help in answering those questions. We want this event to be a social event. We'll be talking about the event over on Twitter. The hashtag for the event is ATM Summit, for Actual Tech Media Summit. And actually, there's a Twitter icon at the bottom of your screen, and you can tweet directly to Twitter, and the hashtag will be automatically appended, so you never have to leave the console and go off to Twitter. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. Actual Tech Media has been doing a ton on LinkedIn lately, and if you look at the handouts box there, that's where you'll find resources from our sponsors today, but you'll also find the link to go and follow us on LinkedIn. You'll also see some social media icons on the top right-hand side of your console there to get to our LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube pages. And about the handouts, some of those are links, some of those are PDF assets that you can download, so make sure that you check out each one of those as today's presenters are speaking, and you can learn more details about their presentation or their solution. So there's some really good resources in there. Make sure you check those out just to the right of the questions box. Now, the audience console that you're looking at there in your browser, you can drag that around, you can resize it, you can maximize windows. So I encourage you to do that right now. Make the slides window as large as possible so that you can see the live demonstrations and the architectural diagrams that will be presented on today's event. Now, I mentioned prizes. We've got 6 Amazon $500 gift cards. We'll be giving those out, I believe, after every presenter on today's event, but you can double check the schedule. We also have 5 awesome MacBook Airs, 13-inch. You can pick the color of your choice on these, and those are today's grand prizes. Now, to be eligible for the prize drawings, you must be present on the live event. There are further legalese details that you should be aware of, and those can be found in the Handouts tab. If you scroll down and click on our prize terms and conditions, grand prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We will reach out to prize winners via email after the event. Now, thanks to generous attendees who win prizes, we've donated thousands of dollars over the years to charities, the charities you see on the screen here. So if you win a prize and you'd like to donate it to charity, we would love to help you do that. Social media, I said the hashtag is ATM Summit. I'll be monitoring the hashtag. I'll be responding, retweeting, liking posts about today's event. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter. We are at Actual Tech Media, and you can follow me on Twitter as well. We are at I am at David M. Davis. Now, I mentioned our ramped up LinkedIn presence. You can find tons of great interview content over there. So make sure that you follow us on LinkedIn, either using the top right icon for LinkedIn or in the Handouts tab. It says follow us on LinkedIn. Just click on that, and you can follow us on LinkedIn to learn more. We also have resources over on the 10 on Tech podcast in the iTunes Store, Facebook, and YouTube. So feel free to reach out on all of those places as well. Before I introduce today's presenter, I do want to point out that today's event is a completely live event. We have hundreds of attendees from around the world. We have many presenters from around the U.S. and I believe around the world today as well. So things can and sometimes do go wrong on live events, but hopefully this will be a perfect event. If something does go wrong, first try a refresh on your browser. If that does not resolve it, post a question there in the questions box. I should mention the recommended browser for today's event is Chrome, and sometimes you have to use an incognito or private browsing session to prevent any sort of pop-up, autoplay security features. And with that, it is time to kick it off with our first presenter, our first keynote interview on today's event, and that is Mr. Jim Nunn. He is the CEO at the Egan Company, and he's going to talk to us about the perspective of a veteran CIO when it comes to digital transformation in the real world.
I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Jim Nunn, CIO at the Egan Company. Jim, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So let's start off. Why don't you just tell us briefly about what the Egan Company is and what you do there?
Sure. We are a commercial construction company. We do mechanical, electrical, fire, life safety, automation, industrial controls, and curtain wall, which is glass on the fronts of buildings. We've done work at US Bank Stadium. We did the glass there. We did the glass at Target Field as well. If you drive through Minneapolis, a lot of the light fixtures you see, we've done alongside the road, and when you drive through the tunnel, we did the lights there too. lots of things all throughout Minneapolis. We like to say that we've touched most of the buildings in Minneapolis in some way, shape, or form.
Awesome. So, I mean, technology's got to be an important part of that. And I know a lot of companies are trying to take, kind of aging IT infrastructure and applications and move them forward. Some people call it digital transformation. What have you all been doing with that at the Egan Company? What's that been like?
Well, I kind of shiver a little bit when I hear, words like digital transformation. I mean, it's a good, meaningful term, taking things and, trying to drive technology into the business. But I think sometimes that can be a little bit switched on its head. I think a better take on that, at least for me in our business, is for me to rather than push technology into the businesses, is to get into the businesses, understand what they're trying to do, understand that as well as I possibly can with my team, and then figure out what technologies we can apply to help them. Because realistically, what we need to do as technologists, what will have the most success at least, is when we figure out a problem and then we can apply our technology to solve, rather than start with a technology and then look for a problem to solve. That's usually a little less ideal. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the far better approach. I think too many IT professionals get, excited, which is good to get excited about technology, but they get excited about a specific technology and then they bring that to the business and they're like, well, how can I take this widget and kind of squeeze it in or force it into the business in some way? And instead, what you're saying is really do it backwards. Understand the business, find the problems, and then look for a technology to solve those.
Yeah, and I've certainly done it both ways, like probably every other technologist out there. I just find that, if I can get in and first build relationships with people in the business and then try to understand their business to the best of my ability, understand the things that they're trying to accomplish, and then apply my technology trade in ways that help and make their lives better, we can go a long way then. We're not pushing the rock uphill. It just starts rolling downhill, because one good thing leads to another, and then before too long, you got a line at your desk with people saying, well, you helped us with that one thing. There's this other thing. Could you think about that? And that's really the fun, exciting thing because in my career, so I've been at Egan for 20 years, which is an incredibly long period of time in this same role. And there was technologies that I was super excited about, and that I, went to the board and I got permission to do, and I've installed those things. And I've since gone back and then to the board again many years later and said, I need to undo that. There's a new, better thing. And you're throwing away that technology and you're moving on with the next technology. And, when I look at my life, my work, or what I've been able to give to the business and just the bigger purpose in the whole thing, I don't want it to be about this technology and that technology and that technology, because it's so transient and it goes away so quickly. I want it to be about taking technology and making people's lives actually better and more meaningful. Take away this monotonous data entry from one screen and enter it into another screen, where you've got people with carpal tunnel and doing jobs that don't fully utilize them as a human being, and instead transforming that job into something that's more meaningful, where they can drive more value to the business. Instead of entering things, now they're looking at the data and they're figuring out a better way for the business to move forward. That's way more fun and way more rewarding when you get to see a person's life transformed through the use of your technology. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the ultimate, kind of reward for being a technologist, is helping, change the lives of the end users and make their life and job, much easier. I mean, we in IT sometimes get stuck on, well, let's replace the NAS with the SAN and the SAN with the NAS, and stuff that doesn't really provide a lot of impact or benefit, in some cases to the business, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, going out and talking to the real people doing the job every day, and it's amazing what we know as technologists. Sometimes we take for granted, and just a little bit of our knowledge can help make every day of their job, so much easier.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with digital transformation and your valuable advice, Jim. Really appreciate you being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great interview there with Mr. Jim Nunn. Really insightful advice there from a CIO out in the field. And with that, it's time to kick off our first presentation. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Narayan Venkat, Vice President of Data Center Systems at Western Digital. Narayan, are you with us?
Yes, David. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me clearly?
I can, yeah. Take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you are from. Thanks for having me on the show today. During this presentation, I'm going to share some insights into some of the innovations that Western Digital, particularly in our data center systems business, have been up to. As David said, my name is Narayan Venkat. I am the Vice President of Data Center Systems. You probably don't need much of an introduction to Western Digital, but nevertheless, I figured I will give you a quick overview of Western Digital and then the data center systems in particular at Western Digital. So we are a $20 billion annual, a company with annual run rate and about $5 billion in cash in FY18. More than 50% of the world's data is actually stored on Western Digital products. And I'm sure that you've used one way, shape, or form, whether on a personal basis or for the company, data storage products that Western Digital has in the market. So our portfolio is pretty wide. Consists of storage systems, SSDs, HDDs, obviously that you're familiar with, and the Western Digital company has a portfolio of leading brands, including SanDisk and WD and GTech, etc. We're a vertically integrated company and a business model, and in the context of the business unit that I work in, which is the data center systems business, we've been growing pretty aggressively. We've been in business for, let's say, probably a little over 5 years, and we've seen substantial growth. And this is the data center systems part of Western Digital, where we offer complete solutions to end customers like you. We've got about 3,000 plus customers, about 8,500 systems and platforms deployed, 3+ exabytes shipped in 2018. Adding about 150 new customers every quarter. It's a pretty substantial investment on the part of Western Digital to deliver comprehensive solutions in the market space. In fact, Jim Nunn is one of our customers. Just to give you a brief sense, an idea as to the portfolio of platforms and systems we offer. On the left, as you can see, is we offer core platforms. So think storage servers, JBOS, which form the underpinnings of the variety of other products that we bring to market. Today, we're going to specifically talk about the composable infrastructure. That is our OpenFlex composable infrastructure, how we're innovating. But in addition to these two products, we have our ActiveScale object storage systems, which scale from half a petabyte to hundreds of petabytes. And then for primary storage, we have our unified block and file storage under the IntelliFlash brand. So the data center systems business is today offering a fairly broad portfolio of platforms and systems. All right, so with that introduction, I'm going to jump into the key areas that I'm going to talk about today, specifically with respect to composable infrastructure. So many of you are pretty familiar with, right, which is, we've gone from, an environment where data is typically held captive in a single application to an environment where data is primarily pooled and shared by multiple apps, right? So you can put data at the center of your business today. You can create, you can access, you can transform, you can make insightful decisions, right? For example, many of us have gone to the Amazon website, we bought something, and then lo and behold, the next time we go visit that, clearly Amazon has a view of what you've purchased. How does it all happen? Because there's a tremendous amount of data that's shared. So at the core of this really comes down to is, do you have an infrastructure that allows you to access, transform, mobilize data? And in the context of that, we're going to discuss where we are and where we're innovating with respect to storage infrastructures and general compute and network infrastructure from a composable standpoint, right? So we've seen that with these changes that are, in the ecosystem and in the data center, we're today dealing with quite a different number of workloads, right? It's totally dynamic. But the interesting thing in all of this is that a survey of mid-sized companies that IDC did, right, we saw that 45% of compute hours and storage capacities are fundamentally underutilized, right? Or utilized, or 55% is underutilized, leading to significant inefficiencies. So the big question is, can you have infrastructure where you can get maximum utility so as to get the maximum value of your CapEx as well as reduce your operational expense, right? So ideally what we want is an infrastructure or a data infrastructure that can scale, that is agile, that delivers on the performance and the efficiency that's required of this changing workload in the environment. So we've been through that. If you go back the last 20 years, we've been going through this infrastructure evolution. I would even say revolution. In some cases, we obviously started off with traditional siloed-based environments, then went to converged, where you had pre-configured hardware and software infrastructures. Then we saw the evolution of hyperconverged, where we brought all of these things in a more of a virtual environment, right? And that has caused a tremendous amount of gains in efficiencies and simplicity of deployment. And if you sort of keep that theme of simplicity, efficiency, agility, etc., so the next phase of our data center infrastructure evolution is about composability, which is, can I take a shared pool of resources that can be composed and made available on demand? And in fact, the bulk of what I'm going to talk about today is what are we doing from Western Digital or in Western Digital from a storage standpoint to facilitate composability in this broad spectrum of infrastructure that resides in the data center, right? So let's look at, let me take a couple of moments and look at what are the pros and cons of, dedicated versus composable. And in the context of a dedicated infrastructure, obviously you have a brick, right? The brick typically consists of compute network and some storage. Storage could be flash or HDD. In the context of hyperconverged itself, and it's how people are deploying, we all know that we went from dedicated physical infrastructure to more of a virtualized infrastructure. But it's still kind of operated in a little bit of a silo, right? You bring in a brick, and that brick consists of some compute network and storage, right? While hyperconverged has dramatically simplified the deployment and management of infrastructure, there's still underutilization. Underutilization from the point of view that some bricks are probably underutilized both from a performance and a capacity standpoint. And so you'll have to go make some physical movement of either virtual machines or storage motion or storage vMotion, as we call it in the VMware environment, to actually rebalance that. What would be nice is, without having to go through that process, can you disaggregate everything, right? Can you disaggregate compute, network, and storage, and then provision them on demand so that you can achieve these four attributes? It can be scalable, efficient, agile, and highly performant. And that's the kind of, that would be the ideal scenario. That would be the endpoint, right? And, studies have shown that, and we've done a bunch of different studies in saying that, okay, what are the benefits of composability? We looked at about, 8 or 9 big data center operators and ran through a bunch of studies with them to figure out, what are the savings, right? And we came up with rough numbers, about 40% lower TCO with composable infrastructure, and then over the long haul, perhaps even drive substantial efficiencies and savings, right, of having a composable infrastructure rather than more of a dedicated infrastructure, right? And in the context of that is where we are innovating. So how can we make it really simple, agile, composable from a data infrastructure or a storage/compute/network infrastructure standpoint, so that you can deploy applications on an as-needed basis, mobilize your data so that you get the most efficiency, right? So with that, let me introduce our vision for composable. Infrastructure should be composable. It's got to be open from the point of view that we want to be able to bring in different infrastructure of different form factors, but orchestrated through a standard API so that you can bring to bear these infrastructure components on demand. It has to be scalable, and open also meaning that you don't have any vendor lock-in, right? So you need to be able to use your orchestration mechanisms to orchestrate any storage infrastructure. It obviously has to be scalable, right? That does, both from a performance and a capacity standpoint, has to not only scale within a rack, but multiple racks as well, right? It has to be truly disaggregated. In other words, if you need to be able to, add more CPU or GPU power to your machine learning apps without necessarily having to go increase capacity, you should be able to do that, right? And that then essentially drives better efficiency, provides you with the agility, and probably reduces your TCO substantially. And it also has to be extensible. Today we're talking about disk and flash, and to an extent, non-volatile memory in more generic sense. Tomorrow we could be seeing, from a storage perspective, storage class memory, more memory-like persistent storage. Fabrics may change, right? And interconnecting fabrics will likely change. So how do we then ensure that the composable infrastructure is actually extensible, right? And so that's our vision for the evolution of the composable infrastructure. So how does it all play? So what it means that is a composable infrastructure fundamentally depends on a fabric to which a variety of different items are connected. Items meaning CPU, GPU, perhaps even FPGAs, memory, flash, disk. So you basically have compute, network, and storage. So there are no physical systems, only composable systems. No established hierarchy. CPU doesn't own the GPU, right? And all elements are peer-to-peer in the network. So that would be the ideal scenario. Obviously, we're still far away from that. But if you think about an environment where we've got a fabric, a high-speed fabric, you can mobilize data. You can actually have data at the hub of it, and then you can bring to bear these elements, whether it's CPU complex, the memory complex, the capacity complexes, flash or disk, etc. And that, we believe, will enable a whole host of different sets of apps, a tremendous amount of mobility. Everybody in the data center today is looking at how do I deploy Kubernetes, right? How do I bring to bear machine learning algorithms in the form of containers? How do I rapidly provision them? A composable infrastructure will enable you to do that very, very efficiently. All right, so what does that mean? So today, if you look at a storage system, whether you look at a converged system, hyper-converged system, that's typically a CPU and memory complex. If you sort of break open, or pull apart a server complex, you see PCIe, and then there's GPU, FPGA, depending on what, if it's a high-performance storage system or it's a GPU cluster. There's a NIC. The NIC is usually, connected to the network, and that's where, data transfers happen. Perhaps there's some flash and some disks that's locally attached, right? And so if we can go from this, right, to more like this, where, there's CPU, everything is actually connected over in Ethernet, right? Let's say high-performance Ethernet, that's just shared fabric. And whether it's GPU, FPGAs, memory, flash, and disk, you're going from more of a physically attached system to more of a shared accelerated storage environment. And our belief is that NVMe over fabric becomes the high-speed infrastructure that allows us to interconnect all of these components, i.e. storage, compute, GPU, as well as capacity, right? So the advantage of that is that you can actually deliver real-time resource allocation. In other words, if you can now orchestrate and compose these things on the fly. So I would love to be able to sort of say, okay, I'm going to virtualize all of these elements, and then I'm going to create a bunch of namespaces, and a namespace is specific to a desired amount of CPU, memory, etc., or even some capacity. And then I'm going to actually go orchestrate all of these in the context of what my applications need. So I create namespaces for memory, flash, and disk. I create slices of CPU, GPU, and etc. And then I create virtual infrastructure, right? We are pretty familiar with the idea of hypervisors, right? We have the context or the concept of virtualization and everything that operates within the context of a virtual machine. If you extend that out to infrastructure itself, how would it look like, right? And then that's our vision for what we are trying to achieve, which is, can we create virtual systems that consist of a set of slices and a set of namespaces so that you've got the CPU, GPU, and the FPGA if needed, interacting with memory, flash, and disk, or, in the future, other forms of persistent memory. And that's our vision for how we sort of bring together composable infrastructure. And obviously, there are a number of different companies that are working on it. We're working at it through the lens of how do we make our storage systems, our storage infrastructure, composable. So how do we do this? Now, obviously, the crux in all of this is an orchestration mechanism, right, that dynamically assigns, compute and flash or, disk or whatever the case is. And, the control plane, as we call it, should be able to compose infrastructure, and in the context of what I am saying, which is virtual storage with one API, so that you've got a control plane that essentially allows you to discover the device, aggregate them into systems, compose them into systems, create storage volumes, and then be able to apply that and connect them to applications. So the idea is, depending on what your application is, what forms of data access they want, whether it's block only or over what we call NVMe logical handles that are essentially virtualized by nature, then we're able to actually bring together infrastructure that can be created on demand, composed on demand, and then be able to be toned down on demand, depending on what your application, the life cycle of your application. So that's sort of the underpinnings of what we are trying to do and what we're innovating on. And our first version of that is what we call OpenFlex. OpenFlex is our modular storage building blocks that provide unified access to storage on a single fabric. These are high performance, low latency systems. There are two versions of it, the F3000 and the E3000. They're all fabric devices. So think about them as an enclosure with a flash, high performance, low latency device. You can use it for low latency apps like AI, ML, real-time analytics, and also for batch processes for big data analytics. So think about them as enclosures with flash or even disk that are connected over a high-speed Ethernet with NVMe access. So think about NVMe over fabric over Ethernet, and pretty open standards. So you can configure them, right? You can create virtual instances of it. You can take slices of them, carve them out, and then be able to provision them to various different, whether it's computer infrastructures or GPU infrastructures. So that's our vision, and it's open from the standpoint that you use standards in APIs to actually configure them and compose them on the fly. So what does that lead to? What that leads to is disaggregated infrastructure. So we believe that being open, having open set of APIs will enable a number of different participants across the various different layers of the stack, and will also sort of encourage different vendors and competitors to play in. And the idea here essentially is to deliver disaggregated infrastructure. So if you want more flash, you can add more flash. You want more compute or GPU, you can add more compute and GPU, right? And the idea here is, can you do this and on the fly, and depending on what your application needs are. Obviously, for smaller applications that are more, that rarely change, you probably don't care. But for those applications and large data center environments where you want to be able to, say, burst, let's say, you're working up to Christmas time, you need more infrastructure and you want to burst it, you'll be able to do that, right? And so the idea here is, can you create purpose-built disaggregated infrastructures and then sort of, bring them, they're standards-based, and bring them together just in the right moment. So in essence, our belief is that the data center of the future is going to be open, right? It's got to be scalable. It's got to be disaggregated. That's the most important thing. And it's got to be extensible so that you can bring all of these elements on an as-needed basis, just like what we've been doing for, applications and, using hypervisors and VMware infrastructures, et cetera. And we're starting to see the same thing evolve with containers in Kubernetes. If you can conceptually take that idea and then be able to do that with infrastructure. And that's kind of what we are after, and that's sort of the innovation that, we are doing within storage infrastructures in the context of our offering, which is called OpenFlex. So with that, brings me to about 20 minutes, and I will open it up for any questions.
Yeah, great presentation, Narayan. We do have some questions here for you. So let's see. While I ask you the first question, I'm going to pop up this poll for the audience. So I want to call everyone's attention out here to this question. It says, what additional information would you like about the Western Digital solution? And the options are data sheet, white paper, pricing, demo, or you'd like to try it for yourself. So I'll just leave that up there. And let's see, first question that came in, they're asking how scalable is this? And what about the real-time scalability of the solution, Narayan?
Great question. Since these are disaggregated elements, right, if I look at a simple enclosure itself, right, that enclosure, what I'll call a sled. A sled, let's say it has 4 SSDs. These 4 SSDs can be 16 terabyte SSDs. So each sled can be 64 terabytes. You multiply that by 20 elements or sleds that are there in an OpenFlex enclosure, you can get to a petabyte in under 3U. So they are extremely scalable. It doesn't mean that you need to go deploy them in one big chunk. You've got the ability to actually deploy them as needed. You can carve them out. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility. So you can start small and grow pretty extensively. So capacity and performance is not a concern at all. That box will deliver millions of IOPS as well. So it scales in performance and capacity, and it has the benefit of composability, wherein you can take a single box and carve them out into logical instances.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, very scalable. So another question here, Michael's asking, if I have an existing storage array, will it work with that as well, or would I need to replace that with what you're describing?
Good question. So in one way to look at this is that these OpenFlex systems provide NVMe over Fabric interconnect. So if an existing storage system can take advantage of NVMe over Fabric, i.e. use OpenFlex as the, for the lack of a better term, a box of flash, then possibly. But I don't think the ecosystem there is there yet. We're seeing a number of interests on the part of customers to actually deploy them as a high-performance box of flash, connected over NVMe to, let's say, a compute infrastructure. So we're still in the early stages of the ecosystem building out, but conceptually, you can get there once we have the vendor actually incorporating NVMe over Fabric JBoss.
Okay, nice. Another question here. Frankie's asking, is it connected via 10 gig iSCSI, or how is this all joined together?
So it's actually NVMe over Ethernet. So it's not iSCSI. At a conceptual level, yes, you'll get a logical handle, but if you think about this more as an NVMe over Fabric, so it's NVMe over Ethernet, and it uses RDMA over converged Ethernet.
Okay. And then I had a couple questions where people are, looking for disaster recovery solutions. Could this in some way help with disaster recovery planning or execution?
Yes, in a way, from the point of view that you think about these as very high performance, scalable network storage, i.e. storage on the network. So depending on what DR application or backup or backup / data mobility application that you deploy, you can actually back them, you can take those, the data sets that are there running on existing infrastructure and be able to back it up into these systems, right? If that's sort of the question that people are asking.
Yeah, okay, nice. Another question here, they say, I have hyperconverged infrastructure. Isn't that enough? Do I need composable?
Great question. I think to a large extent that's going to depend on how big of an infrastructure do you have, right? And we all know that. I'll give you a simple example. When you go from tens of virtual machines to hundreds of virtual machines, right? That's a change. When you go from 100 to, let's say, thousands of virtual machines, obviously the scale with which you're operating becomes bigger. If you fast forward into the future, if you were to believe some of the projections that are coming out from the large data center operators, in terms of the number of containers they intend to deploy over time, these are going to run into thousands, if not tens of thousands within a data center. So it really depends on scale. So it depends on how big of an infrastructure you have, how much scale do you want, how often do you want your, say, virtual machines / containers to be provisioned and deprovisioned, decommissioned, etc. So it's purely a scale-driven environment. So if your scale isn't that big, then you would ask, perhaps hyperconverged is good enough, right? It's when you get to very large scale that you want to get even better utilization across infrastructure elements.
Okay. And then probably final question we have time for here in the live discussion is, we had a number of questions about how can I help or what could I do to help my company make an investment in something, as large as composable infrastructure? Do you have any advice on that?
That's a very good question. And I think before you make any investments per se, and I think it's important for you to, get in the know in terms of what's happening in the composable infrastructure, right? To a large extent, it's going to get driven by what kinds of applications, what application environment you have today, how is it changing in the future, right? And that will allow you to then architect your systems or your data center infrastructure going forward. So I think that would be a good place to start, right? Obviously, from a storage vendor standpoint, these systems are available for you to play around with, right? And get a feel for, your starting point was perhaps NVMe over Fabric. So if you're looking to go deploy storage systems in an NVMe context over Fabric, a great place to start. You get the benefit of NVMe over Fabric high performance storage along with the composable infrastructure so that you can start playing around with it and so that you can architect overall composable systems going forward.
Okay, excellent. Well, Narayan, really great presentation. That's all the time we have for the live Q&A, but there's quite a few more technical questions for you. Maybe you can answer there in the forum and get back to those attendees. We really appreciate you being on the event today. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
And thank you to Western Digital for joining us on today's event. I hope you'll check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. It's actually a tech brief on the OpenFlex composable architecture. So make sure that you download and check that out. I appreciate all the questions that are coming in. I want to tell everyone we are getting to the questions as quickly as possible. There are many, many questions coming in, so we appreciate your patience. We'll do our best to get to every one of those questions. And now it's time for our first prize giveaway on today's event. That is an Amazon $500 gift card going to Jeff Winco of Massachusetts. Congratulations, Jeff Winco of Massachusetts. If you are not Jeff, we have a lot more prizes to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for those. And with that, it's time to move on with our next presentation on today's event, and that is Mr. Darren Miller, Senior Manager of Engineering, Performance, and Test at ClearSky. Darren, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, David. Yep.
Thanks for joining us on the event today. Take it away, Darren.
All right. So I'm going to introduce you to ClearSky and what we're doing here at ClearSky. For those of you that haven't heard of ClearSky before, but what we've done here is ClearSky was founded in 2014 with the mission to build and deliver a storage service that manages the entire data lifecycle. Now, along with that, the service combines performance and availability and access to local data centers as well as data centers in the cloud. The whole premise behind it is this notion of scalability and economics of the cloud and the benefits that we can gain from taking advantage of those infrastructures. We're headquartered in Boston, Mass. We have regional offices, and we have a number of different metro-based data centers throughout the United States. What we delivered was a primary storage service that incorporates offsite backup, DR, as well as compute integration at the edge, or enterprise edge, if you will. So the storage aspect of it is essentially storage as a service, and it has built-in data protection as well as DR capabilities. I'll talk more about how that all is incorporated when we get into the architecture. The data protection piece, we also have integration with applications like VMware and tight integration with those types of applications for more consistent backups and recovery operations, as well as a compute offering and interconnect to multiple or multi-cloud, if you will, connectivity. So if you can think of the notion of edge computing and where things are connected at the edge, what we tried to do here is give access to the data sets from essentially any location that the customer has. So for example, if the customer has multiple offices or multiple locations where they're hosting their data, and it's difficult for them today to manage and create these replication scenarios where they're moving data across regions and so on and so forth. The idea behind ClearSky is there's one data network, and as the data is entered into the service, the data is then accessible by any of these various locations in any particular cloud platform. So a few of the reasons why customers are getting engaged with ClearSky and choosing ClearSky as an option. One of them is simply accessing data, as I mentioned, being able to manage dispersed locations and data growth seamlessly by connecting into a ClearSky Edge device and then accessing those data sets from any of those locations. Consolidation is another big one that we're seeing with companies and industries that have made many different acquisitions, and now they have lots of different locations through these acquisitional type operations, and they're trying and they're having a little bit of difficulty getting all of the data into their corporate infrastructure after these acquisitions take place. So what we're seeing from a ClearSky perspective is if we can connect into the ClearSky data network with an edge device at each of these different locations, they can then migrate their data in, and then the data is accessible at these different locations in a consolidated way. Another one is cloud adoption. We're seeing lots of companies that have been either, or IT teams that have been driven by, their upper corporate management to start incorporating cloud into their data center daily operations. They're a little hesitant for whatever reason, and they're looking for a good solution to kind of get their feet wet, something that's going to give them good performance or data center-like performance, as well as that cloud aspect of elasticity and capacity availability without sort of the latency latency that you hear about or witness when you go directly to a public cloud. And then lastly, like storage cost reduction. We're finding that after customers have been in the service for a while, that they're finding that they can save quite a bit of money just in infrastructure and hardware alone by moving to sort of a hybrid model that ClearSky offers. So from an architecture perspective, the service is built in a way where we have an edge device that we call the edge cache, and the customer environments would connect into the edge cache through, a protocol that they're supporting in their data center today, be it iSCSI, fiber channel, file with NFS or SMB, and so on. And then once they connect into the edge cache, all the data is processed through to the Metropolitan Point of Presence Data Center, or the POP, as we call it. And then we use, as ClearSky, we use the backing cloud, which is, it could be a public cloud provider, it could be a private cloud if that's the desire of the customer. We really don't have a preference as long as it's qualified and from a security perspective as well as a performance perspective from our service. We don't care if it's a private cloud or a public cloud. But we use that backing cloud for the durable copy of the customer's data. So if you can imagine a single durable copy of the customer's data being pushed out to that backing cloud, and then these other aspects of the service, the Metropolitan Point of Presence Data Center, as well as the edge, having portions of that large data set for access in the event that, there's a cache miss, we would service that cache from the POP. But the goal here is really to provide the high performance closest to the compute nodes through that ClearSky Edge cache. And you see at the bottom, we're tiering the aspect of the workload throughout the entire stack. So, we consider the Edge cache the hottest portion of the data set. We also service a hot as well as a warm portion of the data set through that primary point of presence data center. And then the backing cloud has a full, complete copy of the data set that will always be consistent and up to date. It gets pretty interesting when you start to think about data protection and disaster recovery. So we already have that complete copy out in the backing cloud. So that's a durable copy that we could always rely on in the event that there's a disaster regionally or there's a need to retrieve that full copy of the data back for the customer. But we also have copies of the data sets that are hosted in the Metropolitan Point of Presence Data Center, and we have a portion of that data set in the Edge cache. And we tier it all, as I mentioned, based on access frequency and so on. But when you start to think about disaster recovery, the game changes a little bit in that if you think of traditional DR scenarios where you're replicating data from one location to another location, and you're using a software to do that and probably a couple of hardware appliances potentially, and you're spending money on the network connectivity from one location to another location, as well as the hardware that's required to replicate the data center environment in data center 1 over to data center 2. With ClearSky, we're essentially not moving any data. Because we have a complete copy of the customer's data in the service, we simply just change the access. So if you can imagine changing the access point from data center 1 over to data center 2, and then just accessing those volumes at data center 2. That's essentially what we're doing here. And it can be done with essentially an RPO or recovery point objective of 0 because the data is already consistent, it's already up to date. We're just moving the access point from data center 1 to data center 2. It's up to the customer to then, kick off their applications in data center 2 and give their clients connectivity and so on. But from a disaster recovery perspective, the DR operation happens almost immediately. It's just about 2 clicks in our storage manager user interface that says, okay, move these volumes from data center 1 over to data center 2. Change the access point. And you could do that in the event that there's a disaster, meaning you would change the actual access of the production volumes, or you could do it for test and dev and create clones of those volumes and give those clones access to data center 2, or any other like maintenance operation. If you wanted to test your DR scenarios, you could do it that way as well. So very easy to achieve compliance in this model. You can instantly essentially migrate workloads into a secondary data center as well as the managed cloud and eliminate your physical footprint tremendously. So instead of having a number of different storage products, shelves, disk arrays, whatever there might be in there, as well as all of the networking and so on, the Edge Cache is a 2U appliance. It's all flash, and you would drop an Edge Cache into each data center. In addition to sort of the physical DR scenario, we can put an Edge Cache up in a public cloud. So for example, if customer wants to eliminate that secondary data center altogether and would like to move to a physical data center with a cloud-based disaster recovery solution, we can create a cloud edge and give them access that way. So the cloud edge Edge Cache would have direct connect into our primary point of presence data center and access the same data set that's being accessed from the physical data center, from the customer's perspective. So whether you're on-prem or in the cloud, there's a solution here that gives instant DR without sort of the headaches of the managed schedules, the additional hardware and the software and so on. In addition, from a multi-cloud perspective, as I mentioned, we use the backing cloud for that durable copy. And it doesn't matter to us what that backing cloud is. If there's a need for multi-cloud connectivity, we can connect into all of the major public cloud providers, as well as a number of private cloud providers today. So from a features and benefits, we focus highly on edge computing. And the notion of ClearSky and the whole premise behind the ClearSky data network is edge computing, in that the highest compute is always closest proximity to those edge computing devices, whether they're physical servers, whether they're virtual servers, whether they're different types of endpoints like smart devices and so on. We always maintain a single copy, a consistent single copy of the data. From an ingest perspective, we support high-speed ingest into the service. There's built-in off-site data protection, so those archive solutions that are needed today are essentially demanded in terms of archiving data sets. That all goes away because we already have that archive piece built into the service. As I mentioned, complete integration with applications like VMware and so on. The Edge Cache itself is a write-through cache. So as writes come into the service, they're acknowledged at the point of presence data center, and then that write ends up landing on the edge on the way back. And then from a security perspective, there's encryption as soon as the data hits the edge cache. So I have a slide on security that goes through this in much more detail, but throughout the entire service, the data is encrypted, and it's encrypted with a AES 256 encryption passphrase that the customer owns. ClearSky doesn't have knowledge to this. The customer owns and maintains that passphrase so that it's managed and maintained at the customer's location by the customer. We're also SOC 2 compliant. And the benefits that this has gained from a usability perspective is essentially eliminating infrastructure is the goal here. So that pain of constantly having to maintain and monitor a lot of infrastructure in your data center, we can eliminate the majority of that pain process. We have a pay-as-you-go model. I have an actual slide on that as well, but so you pay for the data that you use, not the data that has been provisioned or the capacity that's been provisioned, but the amount of data that has entered the service. Consolidation across data centers. Now, I talked about this already, but being able to consolidate data into a single repository, so to speak, and then accessing that data from multiple locations is a key benefit to the service. And migration, cloud migration is another one. So again, from a simplicity perspective, a reduction of cost perspective, and extending your services and footprint into the cloud, we don't charge extra for disaster recovery or backup or data replication and so on. All of this comes as part of the service. It's built into the cost of the service. So there's no extra fees that a customer would have to endure in terms of accessing their data or ingesting their data. All of that is built into the cost of the service. Compared to some of the other public cloud providers out there, we have a predictable cost structure. The data protection is included. Everything has been provisioned in the service. We have a performance guarantee that we'll be able to perform with a certain level of SLA. There's no extra charge for test and development infrastructure. Security is built into the service, and management has already been accounted for in terms of managing the service and so on. Let's talk a little bit about cost and how the cost structure works. If I can get there. Unfortunately, this one's a build, and it's not working. But let me use this one. Same deal. So if you think of all of the elements of your data center, in that you have your primary SAN environment, your DR SAN environment, all of the WAN connectivity, software associated with the data center like replication software, maybe it's backup software, different storage environments, test and dev, staging, so on. Maybe you have an archive element that you're using. And then the pure physical footprint and the cost associated with those, cooling, space, and so on. Encryption software, if you have encryption software in your data center today, all of these go into a line item worksheet that one of the ClearSky customer success representatives will walk through with you as a customer. And we line item each of these out, and then we kind of look at the total capacity that's needed and how much actual data usage would be needed for this environment as the customer. And then we calculate that in terms of the pay-as-you-go model, which is a monthly charge, and it's a per gig charge. And what ends up happening is you take all of those line items that are traditionally accounted for as CapEx expenses, and they turn into more of an OpEx model, where it's a pay-as-you-go monthly bill model. And over time, what we're finding is the majority of customers are able to incur savings upwards around 50% total cost of ownership year over year. So large savings and really simplifying the data center infrastructure. From a security perspective, I have a slide that I present in all my presentations around security because it always comes up. So I like to try to detail this out a little bit. If you take a look at the image here in this slide, on the left-hand side we have the customer data center, and in the middle is the ClearSky point of presence data center, and then in the right is the backing cloud environment. If you imagine the flow of data from left to right, as data is entered into the system, it's encrypted immediately as soon as it touches the edge cache with that AES 256 encryption passphrase. Again, managed and maintained by the customer. It transmits through an Ethernet private line, which are connected to the edge cache devices. So they're redundant to each edge cache, and they're redundant with diverse carriers. In the event that a carrier had an issue, the second EPL is through a different carrier and a different mechanism. So we have redundancy there as well. Once the data is entered and hits the point of presence data center, it's protected through a multi-tenant environment within the POP. All the hardware in the POP is also protected with a TPM chip, and it is in an isolated environment in protected data centers that are monitored at 24/7, 365. As the data gets moved out of the POP and copied out to the backing cloud, the backing cloud connectivity is through a private direct connect line from the POP to that cloud provider, be it one of the public cloud providers if that's what we're using. So at no point in time in the entire service does the data traverse across any public connection. So they're all private connections, all private lines, and throughout the entire service, the data stays encrypted. All the way till it hits the backing cloud and back on a retrieval until it exits the edge cache from the application server. So again, secure enterprise class data centers are hosting this data. We do third-party penetration tests once a quarter, multiple times a year, and in this event, we contract out a security company to run a series of tests to try to break into the environment. And they run through their, penetration testing, and then they produce an attestation report. That's a public report. It's available at any point in time upon request, and it details out the tests that they ran, the results, and all the findings and so on. And again, we're SOC 2 compliant in terms of that. Addressing compliance in regards to, say, like GDPR, HIPAA, FedRAMP, things of that nature. So again, all the encryption keys are owned and maintained by the customer. They're always under the customer control. CSD, as well as the public cloud provider, never have access to the unencrypted data. It's always encrypted throughout the entire service. In regards to locality control, the customers choose the locations of the backing cloud, as well as where the edge cache lives. So if the edge cache lives in a physical data center that the customer owns, that's where we install it. If the edge cache is in a public cloud provider environment, then that's where that's installed. The customer also has control of the backing cloud that they would like to use, as long as it's supported by ClearSky. So at all points in time, we know exactly where the data is located in terms of the customer's environment. And again, the data never transmits over public connections or infrastructure. It's always private. In regards to auditing, we have fine-grained file access logging, as well as change logging for administrators and so on. So in most cases, when a customer is, say they're looking for HIPAA compliance and they need to meet the HIPAA compliant regulations, we would essentially provide that customer with a BAA document that describes how the service is built, how the data flow works, and so on. And that's, for all of our healthcare customers, that has been sufficient. From a FedRAMP perspective, we would do the same type of thing in regards to providing the customer with a document that outlines and details out exactly the data flow and where the data lives and how it's secure. So again, what is ClearSky? ClearSky is a hybrid cloud storage service. It utilizes all flash at the edge. It's an alternative to EBS or S3 storage. We do utilize S3 for backing cloud environments if that's the ask, but we essentially rely on the performance aspect of our infrastructure to give customers that level, that second level of performance. So from a high performance perspective, having that edge cache closest proximity to compute means that we're going to tier all of those blocks that are accessed most frequently onto that edge. And so that's the high-speed flash closest to the compute. If in an event that where there's a seek that misses the edge and it has to go to the POP to get acknowledged, you know, we're talking maybe less than 3 milliseconds response time from the POP to the edge. And if for some reason the data is not in the POP and it's out in the backing cloud, we can service that request as well. So a lot of the solutions that you see in the field today have a similar type edge device, but many of them go from that edge directly to a public cloud provider. And by doing that, you have essentially a higher latent response time from the edge to the public cloud provider and back. Usually that's typically around 20, 25 milliseconds or more, depending on how far the distance is. By having that point of presence data center in the middle, in the event that there's a cache miss, we can service that request extremely fast as if it were local storage. ClearSky's 100% encrypted. The data as it's entered the system, encryption throughout the entire system, 100% private infrastructure, and secure monitored data centers. I mentioned the data protection, and we include the different protection points as well as disaster recovery with the service. Users also have the ability to create snapshots of volumes, volume clones, etc. It's essentially instant migration from on-prem to the cloud and vice versa. So once the data is in the service, the data is hosted out in the public cloud with that backing copy. And then it's available on-prem at any time the data needs to be accessed. And then lastly, it's scalable. You know, we support 64 terabytes in provision volumes with the pay-as-you-go model. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this virtual summit today. Thank you, David, for having me host or having me present. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for being on, Darren. Really great presentation. We got lots of questions that have been coming in about your really, innovative, unique solution here. So while we go through those questions, I'm going to pop up this poll for the audience just says, what additional information would you like about the ClearSky data solution? I saw at least one person who commented and said, we might be interested to know more for a project we have. So you might want to indicate that here. Would like to try for myself. Some other feedback came in, great presentation, things like that. So with that, let's start some Q&A here. First one is they're asking about a lot of questions about compliance. Could this help me with HIPAA compliance? Can we modify the encryption method? Can we customize the encryption? Any feedback on that, Darren?
So the encryption method is not customizable. We have the AES 256 encryption that's part of the service today. From a HIPAA compliance, we have a number of different customers in the healthcare industry. They're all required to provide HIPAA compliant infrastructures. So we've provided them with BAA documents, and they've been totally sufficient for those customers. From a FedRAMP perspective, it would be a similar process. Essentially, we would provide that customer with exactly the information that they would need to achieve their FedRAMP compliant regulations.
Okay, nice. Another question here, Maria, she's asking, we have a small data set. Is there what's the entry point that you typically recommend for this where it makes sense for companies?
Yeah, our entry point to the service is typically around 20 to 25 terabytes.
Okay.
Just from a perspective of it makes things more economic for the customer as well as ClearSky when we're dealing with larger data sets. So yeah, the entry point's typically 20 and 25 terabytes.
Okay. And then let's see, last question we probably have time for, that is what happens in the case of a virus or say like ransomware? What would prevent that from kind of infecting everything?
Great question. In fact, I was kind of expecting a ransomware question. It comes up quite a bit, but essentially what would happen is as soon as the ransomware is detected, the customer has a few different options. First option, and probably the go-to option for any customer that has a ransomware attack, is to just shut down their servers. The way ransomware works is it starts to infiltrate the different systems in your data center through your network and so on. So if you detect it, shut down everything. I know it's not exactly what corporate wants, but it's the right thing to do. And then the cleanup process would essentially be, if you know the exact point in time of the attack, then we can recover data from snapshots in the ClearSky service from point in times prior to that. In the event that it got a little bit further, we can always, as I mentioned, we have that durable copy in the backing cloud. We can always bring the entire data set back from that backing cloud to the customer's edge once they've cleaned out their data center. So the customer needs to first, stop, halt, cease operations, and then start walking through the process of cleaning up their data center environment. Once that's done, then we'll get the data back to that point in time right before the ransomware attack.
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Well, there's so many questions out here for you. I've had trouble trying to keep up with all of them. That's all the time we have in our live, Q&A session here. But hopefully, if you can stay around for a few minutes and reply to some of these questions out here, I know the audience would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Darren.
Thank you, David. Have a great day.
For more information on ClearSky, check out the URL that's right there in your audience console. If you click on that, that will bring up the ClearSky Data website, and you can learn more about the ClearSky Data solution. Now, before we announce our next presenter on today's event, I'm going to first announce our second gift card winner. That is Jesus Perar from Kansas. Jesus Perar from Kansas. And our first grand prize winner is Ramona Winkelbauer from Virginia. Congratulations, Ramona Winkelbauer from Virginia and Jesus Perar from Kansas. We will reach out to you to deliver your prizes, and we got a lot more prize giveaways to stay. So stay tuned for those giveaways. And with that, it's time to move on to our next presenter on today's event. I'm excited to introduce Mr. David Clements, Information Systems Leader at Igneous. David, are you on?
Yes. Hi, David.
Thanks for being on the event today. Take it away.
Thanks for having me. I'm David Clements. I am the Director of Solutions Architecture for Igneous Systems, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about data discovery. And so let me first give you a little background on Igneous. So Igneous, we focus on unstructured data management delivered as a service. So this is data generated by machines, typically stored as file or object data. We have 3 services today. Those services are Data Protect, which we've discussed in prior actual tech media virtual summits. And if you want to take a detailed look at that product, you can go back and look at those demos that we've done of that product in the past. We also have our Data Discover product, which we're going to discuss today, which gives you visibility to your data. And the Data Flow product, which helps you move unstructured data from system to system or from location to location. So as I said, we do this all as a service, which means that we're focused on doing this anywhere, at scale, and for everyone, so for IT and end users alike. So as in the past, we talked about Data Protect as a service, and in Data Protect, our value is the ability to API integrate with NAS and object storage to help protect that data on premises and or any public cloud provider. We accomplish this through highly scalable indexes, high performance latency aware data movers, and latency aware scanners. The result is we can protect your NetApp, Isilon, Cumulo, Pure FlashBlade, or any other NAS device that you have at any time of the day without disrupting any of your applications. And since this is as a service, there's just really no learning curve, and the deployment is incredibly fast. Igneous handles all the software updates and the proactive mitigation of all issues. We like to call this supervised data protection. Igneous is watching out for your SLAs. I mentioned that we're going to cover something a little different this webcast. So at this point, I'm going to go more into Data Discover. But before I do that, we have a polling question. And that polling question is, how much file data do you think your organization manages today?
So the question is in the screen there on the slides window. If you don't mind answering that, we will share the results. I'm curious to see the results of this. And I think it's interesting how the question is phrased. How much file data do you think your organization manages? And I'm sure that's intentional because a lot of organizations don't know. There's just so much data out there. It's really hard to keep track of it and to figure out, how much you have, where it is, who owns it. So let's see the results of this. And David, what do you think?
Okay, so these are typically what we see in the environments, our customer environments. We have a few customers that are focused in at the very large, the tens of petabytes, tens of billions of files. And there's also, of course, lots of different organizations that have, under a petabyte of data. So this is generally what we see. And so with that information, we're going to, as we go into the Data Discover product, we really run into a lot of times the question of how much of that data just hasn't been touched in a while, even a year or more. And with our customer base, what we're seeing is 40 to 60% of that data that's sitting on that primary storage within the environment hasn't been touched in over a year. So a lot of times people think that their primary storage is not that expensive. It's just the cost of disk. That's what you hear. But as we evaluate what those real costs are with our customer base, what you find is that storing data really is expensive. You're paying for your cost of your primary data, as well as you're paying for the cost of any secondary copy of it, which is generally the form of disaster recovery or backup of your current data. And so in large organizations, that could get into the millions for just storing stale data. In the small organizations, that's still in the tens of thousands of dollars to $100,000 of storing data that nobody is looking at or using any further. So how do you solve that problem of expensive, stale data within your environment? The simple roadmap to savings is first thing you have to do is you have to analyze that data. You need to understand your file data as it sits within your environment. And having the visibility into that data is not something typically IT operations has. That visibility is really sitting out with the end users or the different business units that have access to that data. The next step to this is to have a fact-based conversation with those business owners, with those end users about their data. Asking them to just clean up their data really does not get the job done. They'll say it's all being used, it's all needed. So you need to really have a clear fact-based conversation. And then once you do that, to build a plan. The plan might be simply to delete some of that data, because it could be multiple copies of the same data. I mean, in some environments, I've seen as much as like 6 copies of the same data. Another alternative could be to archive that data because it's some type of data of record. There's compliance concerns, and it needs to be stored for a specific amount of time. And if that data needs to be stored and archived for a specific amount of time, that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to sit on your more expensive primary storage. You could decide to do nothing with that data. Maybe that's some type of reference data that nobody's making any changes to it, but it's referred to all the time, and it is indeed the type of data that you want on your primary storage. And lastly, you'll need to execute on reclaiming that data and coming up with your justifications as to what that can do for the business, what kind of money that can save. So that's a simple roadmap to savings. What we provide with Data Discover is file analytics. We give you a simple, fast, small VM that you can drop into your environment that can quickly pull and scan your data. It's scalable to billions of files and petabytes of data within your environment. And it's all delivered to you as a service, meaning we work with you and can install that VM in just 30 minutes. And at that point in time, we can now manage that application going forward, as well as work with you on reviewing the results. So what does that look like? So at a high level, you get an enterprise view and visibility into all of your data. You can see some bucketized view of the age of your data. And then underneath that, the way that's all just really accomplished is, like I said, it's just a small VM deployment. We import your NAS system, so we simply just get a credential into your NAS system. We scan the entire system, and and we do that within with most environments, we can do that within just a day or two. We can scan as fast as 200,000 files per second, or 17 billion files per day is the type of scan rates that we see. So that pretty much can chew up and gobble up all the information in an entire environment within a very short period of time. We do that scanning the instant that you add that system to the environment, and we auto-scan going forward then weekly, so you can see changes that happen within the environment. It's extremely scalable. It's built for billions of files. It's built to handle multiple locations and a global view. And as I've been saying, it's all delivered as a service to you. So let's hop over and take a quick look at the application so you can see how it looks. Okay, excellent. So this is just an implementation of Igneous that includes both Data Protect and Data Discover. This is the overall dashboard. So I'm just going to quickly just jump into what it takes to see your systems within your environment. So quite simply, all you do is you go into Systems and you add a system. That's a simple action of adding whatever specific type of system you have in your environment, which includes all the major NAS providers, as well as any type of alternative NAS solutions you have under the generic NAS solution. So we've been able to scan anything from ZFS, Lustre, Linux, StorNext, GPFS, all those kinds of things go under generic. And then we have further integration, API integration into the listed NAS solutions. I'm going to go ahead and add a system right now. What we do is we just get, at one time, we collect your admin credentials. We do not save these credentials. We simply use them to create a role on that device so that going forward, everything we do will be clearly identified on that device, and we will not be affected by any password changes to your admin credentials. Once I've added that device, then Data Discover will immediately start scanning that device. Now, I've already imported some devices here, so I'm going to pull those up. The scanning process, like I said, we can do 17 billion files per day, so depending on your environment, you can get a feel for how long that might take. And you can see now how this dashboard works. So from this dashboard, I can see all the various systems within my environment. I'm going to jump into Vader. And from here, I could start to look at things like how I can sort this based on what systems have the most data that has not been touched in over a year. So I'm sitting under Vader, which is a system, and then I have a directory, and one of those directories is devices. Under that devices, I have a large amount of data that hasn't been touched over a year. Actually, it's 2 petabytes out of the 3 petabytes within here. If I click further within this environment, I can see the different types of devices that are out there and how old that data is. And I can scan that stuff based on the more active devices to the more inactive devices. And so this is, this is the kind of machine data that we see that's used for security devices within environments. You might have found that there's some devices that have gone offline and you don't need that data any longer. There's other examples I have in here. There's another example I have for lab environments. So this could be a great deal of different labs within your environment. You could be looking at, out of these lab environments, which ones are the most active, which ones are the most inactive. If I go into, let's say, lab 12 here, and I find that there's some set of active and inactive users within that lab. Maybe those people that were working in that lab are no longer working there. They've moved on to other labs, or they moved on to other jobs, and their data has become stale within that lab. So now, as you can see, I can quickly see all of the users that were in that lab that have stale data. Besides being able to kind of get that look, you can also see all the who's been busy in that environment, and you can help. All of this information can be helped to have a discussion with your business unit, a fact-based discussion with them on what could be your plan for how you want to manage this data. So for this very active data, you may decide that the primary system this should be running on is a high-end primary system, and for the stale data users, you may decide that you need to archive and or delete this. When you want to take a look at this information, you could dig down to any level you like. So I'm going to go in here to a system that I have called Ghana. And in here I have lots of data, and I can go very deep. And so you can continue to crawl down deeper and deeper and deeper and instantly look at any level within that, with that system. So that gives you kind of the overall of what our solution looks like. This is, as I said, this is simply a VM that you can drop in your environment. It's a very lightweight VM for the ability to scan 17 billion files per day. It's just a 4 vCPU VM with 16 gigs of RAM. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to end sharing my screen. So this gives you a great kind of overall understanding of Igneous Data Discover. This is the analyze step within this roadmap to savings, and allows you to then have take the next step, which is the fact-based conversation with your end users, and to build a plan. And then, like I said in prior virtual summits for Actual Tech Media, you can find demonstrations of our Data Protect product, which can help you with both backup and archive of your data. So let's go over really quickly a customer example here. We have a customer that had a 65% savings by building this type of plan and working with their environment. So what they had was they had a large environment where they had a proposed expansion to add 2 petabytes of storage within their environment. So their environment was running very close to full. They went through to their vendors and they asked for quotes and went through the process of figuring out what the cost to expand their primary storage was, what would be the cost to expanding their backup solution, and they come up with $500,000 total price. With Data Discover installed, they analyzed the entire 6 petabyte environment, which consisted of over 3 billion files. And they found that 2.4 petabytes of that data was old or has not been touched in over a year. So at this point in time now, they were able to cost justify running this type of tool within their environment. They also moved forward and bought Data Protect Archive with us and archived their data to the cloud. All of those costs, including the data in the cloud, came to $150,000. So these are yearly costs. And so what you find in just a yearly cost savings of $300,000 and close to $1 million over a 3-year time. So this is a pretty good example of the type of customers that we have and what we can do for them. What's next? Hopefully, what we'll get you to do today is click on the link to take a test drive. It really is just a 30-minute setup with us to get this VM running within your environment, and get a great view of what your environment looks like today. As I said, this is a test drive. So after you've seen the information and you understand the value, you can determine if this is the type of tool you want to continue to use to have those fact-based discussions and build your plan. So that's it for me. Thank you. I think we might have some questions.
We do, David, yeah. While we do that, let me pop up this link one more time because I want to point out to everyone that that link on the screen there in blue is clickable. So you can just click on the link that says www.igneous.io/ATMVS right in the slides window. Just mouse over that, your mouse turns into a finger, and you can click right there to open a new browser tab. So I'll leave that up for a minute while we do some Q&A, give everyone a chance to check that out. First question that came in here, do you have any examples, or would this be a good use case for a hospital or a healthcare organization?
Yes, so I can give you quite a few examples. So for hospital or healthcare, you could, if it's a research hospital, obviously the kind of lab example was a pretty good example for that type of environment. If it's patient data, if you have things broken out by different departments, if different departments have access, we can see all of that data across the entire environment. If it's multi-hospital environment, we can see the data across all of the locations. You know, a lot of the large hospitals run in many different states. They also have multiple different type of admin staff that are supporting those hospitals. So each business unit, you know, or each hospital or each state can also have their own release of this product. You don't have to combine them all together if a global view is not what you're looking for. If you're looking for a specific area or a hospital view, you can have an instance running that way. So hopefully that gives you some good examples of how it can be used.
Yeah, yeah. Another question, this is kind of along the same lines. Richard is asking, is there a way to create a policy for customized data? For example, you know, this is older data over here. I don't want to take this into account. Kind of customize policies or reporting?
So because we scan data so fast, and we don't charge by capacity, that's really not that necessary. What we actually find is that sometimes data that's older that you don't think needs to be scanned is actually may have some activity on it. And somebody may be using that. It may even be just like a copy. We've even seen where it's a copy of the data and nobody's supposed to be using it because there's another copy of the data that's the current copy and we've got people in there. But that said, you can just decide not to add the credentials for a specific NAS solution within your environment and choose not to scan it. You add these systems one by one, and then we run those scans through, and then continue to scan them going forward.
Okay, excellent. Another question here: how do you protect the metadata that Igneous uses?
Sure. So all of the metadata is stored in a proprietary format and is encrypted as it's sent across to our environment. Once that data lands within our environment, that data sits in a customer-specific instance of the solution, so there's no shared system. Your actual data is never stored. We're only picking up metadata. So the only thing that is kind of transferred across is the file, you know, the directory names and the system names. And so you can think of it as the same type of data that's used for monitoring, only deeper down the data path. And this data is at no point in time available to the public or publicly accessible and is never sitting within the same instance as any of our other customers, and it is always encrypted as it's transferred and as we use it, stored in a proprietary way.
Okay. And here's a question Dennis is asking. Actually, sorry, Tom is asking, are you able to scan and classified data or PII data or encrypted data? And I guess, I mean, you're just scanning the metadata. You're not actually scanning the data itself?
Correct. So this Data Discover product that we're releasing only scans the metadata. It does not crack open a file. And if this, you know, the person that's asking this question would like to get in contact with us, We'd love to talk to you about other products that we can build business workflows that would allow you to do more. But what we're presenting today is really based around that business discussion of how old is my data? Do I have the best plan for managing that data?
Okay. And before we do the last question here, I want to call everyone's attention to the poll question on the screen. What additional information would you like about the Igneous solution? You can check one or multiple answers there. Actually, just select one, please. Looks like it allows multiple, but just select one. So another question here they're asking is about the system configuration required to get the scan rates that you're talking about. What is that, David?
Sure. So that is a 4 vCPU VM with 16 gigs of RAM. That's it. So it's simply we spend 30 minutes on the phone with you to get your VM installed, and the process started, and you're off and running.
Very nice. So simply download a VM and deploy it and start scanning and learning all about your data. Sounds easy.
Yeah, very easy.
I like it. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but really great presentation, David. We got tons of questions that have come in. There's a few more that you might be able to get to out there before you go. I'm sure the audience would appreciate that. Thank you for being on the event today.
Thank you.
For more information, make sure you visit igneous.io and check out their solution and do the free test drive of the new Data Discover solution. And also answer the poll question that's on the screen right there. I'll just leave that up while I announce our next set of prize winners. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Jeff Lycos from California. Congratulations, Jeff Lycos from California. And our next grand prize, another Apple MacBook Air going to Michael Dunlap of Indiana. Congratulations, Michael Dunlap of Indiana. Lots more prizes to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for those. And now it is time for our next keynote interview. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Ned Bellavance, author, Azure MVP, author of numerous Pluralsight training courses, and he'll be interviewed by Mr. Scott Lowe, who is the CEO of Actual Tech Media. They're talking about the 5 things that IT should stop doing immediately.
I'm Scott Lowe with Actual Tech Media, and I am here with Ned Bellavance, and we're going to talk about something that's probably near and dear to many of your hearts, and that's keeping up with your skills and keeping up with what's happening. I am aware that IT changes every once in a while.
I've heard that. One might call it sort of a hamster wheel.
It's always been that way, and it's probably never going to change.
People keep talking about accelerating. I think it's about the same as it's always been.
Oh, I think it's accelerated. That's my opinion.
I don't know if it's accelerating. It's more expanding.
It is expanding.
There's so many different fields that you could consider under the umbrella of technology.
That's a good way to put it.
You've got data scientists and AI and machine learning, and then you've got storage-centric and cloud-centric and IoT and all these different little subgenres of tech. And it's how do you keep up with the larger field and then in your specific field?
Yeah, and I think the way you put it is great. Expand it, but each individual area is still doing its own little hamster wheel.
Yeah, still churning out. So yeah, if you're cloud, because that's what I tend to get into, I'm like a cloud specialist, if you want to call it that. It's really hard to keep up with all the service announcements that come out of AWS and Azure and Google. I mean, Google Next is happening right now, and I'm sure there's a laundry list of things that have come out, and it's going to be really hard to digest all of those announcements and then the stuff that Azure and AWS are going to dump on top of you as well.
So if I'm an IT guy, IT gal, IT person, whatever you happen to be, then what do I do these days? I mean, there's still certifications, there's still training courses, but companies don't want to send people off to weeks of training anymore.
Right, and I don't think sending people off to weeks of training was necessarily valuable.
No, I never found it that valuable.
A lot of the stuff that you learned at that sleepaway camp of whatever, you lost within like a week of coming back because you weren't using any of it.
Right.
You learned a whole bunch of theoretical knowledge and a lot of practical stuff that you can't apply to your day job. So it just goes away because you have to focus on the things that actually matter to you. So that's probably the number one place to start, is for IT pros to focus on the things that are valuable to their job role that they have today and the job role that they want tomorrow.
And so they have to figure out what they want to do tomorrow. It's a challenge in and of itself.
Right.
And they have to be able to be willing to think about what they want to do tomorrow beyond what I'm doing today.
Right, which can be hard when you're putting out fires 24/7. But
absolutely.
I know that's a challenge and a frustration. So it's probably good to sort of dip your toe in a few things and see what seems interesting. And an easy, low friction way to do that is podcasts.
Yeah?
Yeah. We all have a commute or a workout or something like that we have some downtime where we're not doing work. That's an opportunity for you to listen to some technical podcasts and kind of get a sense of what's going on out there in the world and what you might want to dive into. So that's maybe one avenue to do it.
I've heard of this company, Pluralsight. Have you heard of them?
Might have heard of them.
One of the things I like about their model is that you can get very discrete. I want to know about this aspect of this technology, and you can go find a module to learn.
Right. So, their format is to have a getting started course or a foundations course, and then have more deep dive courses on specific aspects of a technology. So, if you're paying for a membership for something like Pluralsight, you have access to the entire course catalog. You can literally just, I want to watch the intro module for the Foundations of Ansible course. Do I care about Ansible? Is this something that, seems interesting, useful at work, or useful in my professional life? If it is, awesome. Watch the rest of the course. If not, you've only spent 10, 15 minutes. You can crank up the dial and watch it at 2.5 speed if you can handle it.
Right.
and just kind of get a feel for, is that something that I think will help me in my career, or I want to, get more into.
I like the idea you just put forth that you can kind of try it out. And that's one of the nice things about Pluralsight's model, is that it's a monthly fee, so it doesn't matter how much you watch or how little you watch. Personally, I think another way that people can keep up with the market in general is to watch Megacast, EcoCast, and Virtual Summits by Actual Tech Media.
Yeah.
Trademark. Just kidding. But there are lots of those kinds of opportunities, virtual events and things like that are out there today as well.
And I would caution against watching a webinar or something that's put on by a specific vendor. Because obviously they're just going to talk about their technology, how awesome it is, and how everybody else's technology is kind of garbage. That's not particularly helpful when you're just trying to get a sense of what's out there and where technologies are headed.
Agreed.
I would go for more the independent or multi-vendor presentations where you get a broader view of where the market's going and what interesting things are happening in technology, and just not just the speeds and feeds of Joe's blazing new 2U server.
I agree with you. In fact, one of the rules we have around our events is they have to there's a non-disparagement clause in the contract. And I'm not kidding. One of the rules is that you have to stick to your own technology. Now, we've had occasions where vendors slipped up. That happens. But we try to keep our events focused on the topic at hand and not on bashing competition, because people don't want to watch that. They don't want to. That's not how they're going to learn.
Right. No, you're not being informative if all you're doing is bashing the other person's product. That's not helpful for anyone, really.
So, let me just ask you this. I mean, you have done a lot of courses for Pluralsight. I've done courses in the past. It's been a while. But what do you find? Like, do you find them beneficial to you from a learning perspective, creating those courses?
Yeah, actually. You might think you're an expert in a topic until you actually have to explain it to somebody else.
I know.
I actually don't know how that works. So
then you gotta go figure it out.
And then you got to go figure it out. So in the journey to develop a course, I end up learning a lot more about the topic than I knew before. I mean, obviously I had to have some base level of knowledge in order to outline a course and get it ready. But when I'm diving into the minutia of a demo or trying to explain to someone, different storage technologies in Azure or something, I actually have to really know what I'm talking about so I can feel confident about saying it on something that's going to be recorded and watched by, potentially thousands of people.
They'll catch you.
They'll catch me. They might call me out on that.
Yeah, and you can't be an expert at everything. So
no, absolutely.
I think people are generally kind enough to understand that.
Yes, and most people, they'll leave a comment, hey, this is a little bit different or a little bit wrong, and I'll try to correct it, whenever possible. But yeah, I mean, the process of doing a presentation or developing a course forces you to think more deeply about a topic and learn it a lot better. So if you are starting to go down a particular avenue on a technology, find a user group that, or try to submit a paper for a conference or something that you want to present on. That will force you, or at least hopefully force you, to really dive into the technology and know it front to back. So when you get up in front of those people, you feel confident about what you're talking about.
I know how you feel about having to learn as you go to a point. I learned System Center Configuration Manager because of a course I created for pre-plural site train
There's
signal.
There's a support group for that.
I know. Believe me. I'm painfully aware sometimes because I used to do some consulting around that too, and it's just like, why do people do this to themselves?
It's a mystery. Well, at least you weren't doing SCOM.
Actually, I was. I was doing both.
Fair enough.
And along with Microsoft Data Protection Manager at the same time. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's where the drinking problem came from.
Yeah, I had to. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say any more than that because I'd probably violate something.
Probably. And I'm sure there's SCOM administrators out there just screaming about the fact that their product's awesome, and I'm glad that they like it.
Done well, and if you really know what you're doing, it can be good.
Yes.
But anyway.
The learning curve is steep.
Very steep for both.
Yes.
But we went way off topic here. So
a little bit.
If you're an overworked IT pro, what are like the top 3 things that you think they need to do right now to start thinking about tomorrow and to continue to enhance their skills, especially if they're in an environment where they're overworked and they don't have a lot of time for training and things like that?
Right, yeah. I mean, that's tough, right? When you're in an overworked job where you're being asked to do too much with too little, I think prioritizing a little bit and being willing to say no. It's really hard to do, and a lot of us that are in IT want to jump in. We want to be the hero. We want to help out. But at a certain point, we have to say, no, I can't do that. Or if you want me to do that, it's going to take a realistic amount of time. Push back and make that space for you to learn and progress. If you're in a situation where your company can't be supportive of that, short term, you kind of have to deal with it. But long term, look for a company that is supportive of the concept of you progressing in your career and as an IT professional.
Very good. Ned, thank you for this great conversation.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure being on.
All right, great interview there with Ned and Mr. Scott Lowe. And now it's time for our next presenter on today's Emerging Innovations Virtual Summit. I'm excited to introduce Bassam Khan, Vice President of Products and Technical Marketing Engineering at Gigamon. Bassam, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hello, thanks for being on the event today. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bassam, and I look after product and technical marketing here at Gigamon. Today, we are here to talk about digital applications and the need for network visibility in order for us to deliver the digital transformation process and the digital applications that come with digital transformation. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about digital transformation and then jump into the capabilities and what's needed and a little bit on what Gigamon has to offer. Feel free to ask questions. I'd like this to be a little bit conversational, albeit over chat window, but I'd love to hear your comments or questions. Please do post them on the chat window, which I will get to see pretty much in real time. So we're here to talk about Gigamon Application Intelligence Framework, but before I dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about digital transformation. We've all heard about it. We've read about it. It's coming. It's here. It's been here for 5 years. It's coming for the next 20, and so on. The concept here is really straightforward. It is the notion of a company needing to disrupt their current business model, what's worked for us in the past, in order for us to keep up with our competition, particularly new entrants into our space that's coming in with new technologies. Think Uber, think Lyft and Netflix and Amazon, how all these companies are disrupting current providers in each of the spaces. And so as a result, we as providers, and even we as new entrants, we have to innovate in order to keep up. According to IDC, this is a major investment, totaled up to over $1 trillion spent over a period of 3-4 years. Starting off with $1 trillion base, that is a massive growth. we're all part of this. This is the really, really cool part, is we're all in tech, and we're all out there in making this happen. What used to be in IT, albeit in the 1990s, and we did not get this much sort of a front and center role in changing the investment company I used to work for. It was more of a back office function. Now, with digital transformation, digital applications, IT takes a much more of a center stage going forward. So I am particularly excited about what we're going to be able to accomplish being in this space. So what is digital transformation? It is the way a company reinvents its business and does things differently in order to meet customers' needs, changing customers' needs. So the first thing that happens in digital transformation is vision. This is where the executives or some leaders, maybe the board, go on offsites. They figure out this is where we want to take the company based on the landscape that's changed because of these new entrants, because of competition, new products, and so on. That vision happens with the execs. And at some point, execs say, okay, now this is the vision we want to go towards, and we're going to propagate this across the company. So they build the capabilities, the culture to accommodate that. We have to move fast kind of a culture. It's okay to make mistakes. Let's keep moving and move in the right direction. So Gigamon, we don't play a part in steps 1 and 2. IT is being pulled in more and more into those vision and direction setting and so on because it's so technology dependent. The third thing that happens in order for digital transformation to take place is the notion of building digital applications to deliver that vision. So what are digital applications? It's kind of a broad term that's being used out there, but basically it's the next generation or current generation applications, usually cloud first, usually leveraging microservices, Docker containers, and so on, but almost always spanning multiple tiers and multiple touch points. So it's not only public cloud, it may be multiple public cloud. It's not only multiple public clouds, it might also touch back into our corporate environment to pull up customer data. So the application is much more spread within a company, but also across companies. So Walmart, for example, has outsourced all their finance and accounting to a third-party company. So a lot of Walmart applications now reach out in real time and make calls to their partner services. And that's a kind of a common theme. So the good news is these applications are very powerful, very flexible, very agile. The tricky part is the notion of managing these applications, monitoring these applications. So if you think about it, we used to be in the three-tier application world, very comfortable space for us, where we would have the data tier, the logic tier, and the presentation tier, and we could monitor the heck out of that kind of an application. So we could have database plugins, for example, that sees exactly what queries my users are making. So from a performance monitoring perspective, from a security perspective, data loss prevention perspective, I know exactly what's going on. Mid-tier, I could watch a logic endpoint. If it's a PC endpoint, I could have plugins, agents that run on my endpoint rather, to make sure that the applications are behaving, the data is not leaking, security perspective, user behavior, and so on. But guess what? With this kind of a distributed environment, massively distributed environment, it's much, much harder to monitor everything because the data is application components, parts of the application is spread across everywhere. So I can't deploy agents everywhere. It's hard for me to gather the microservice to microservice communication that's happening in the cloud and be able to centralize all of that information. And that is absolutely key. Why is it key? Because it's for security reasons and for user experience reasons. With user experience, as I mentioned, I could figure out where the bottlenecks are very quickly in the old world. In the new world, it's much, much harder for me to figure out exactly where the bottlenecks are. Security perspective, same thing. Now it's distributed much closer to the internet, much closer to the publicly accessible places that are dangerous to me. And it doesn't have to be direct attacks to my company. It could be other forms of attack. So about a year ago, I don't know if all of you have read about the, I wouldn't name the name, but a major new disrupting car company being hacked. So this was an AWS misconfiguration issue that was somewhat common out there. At least it was a vulnerability out there. So a company called Redlock, which is a white hat type of a company, they went out, they found this vulnerability, they checked out a bunch of servers on AWS. They contacted the companies one by one. You need to patch this, you need to patch this, because it's giving anybody access to the to a Docker console, basically, a Kubernetes console. one of the servers they went into, they looked at the processes running, and they found all of these car companies name.exe, or not exe, but all the agents, all the daemons running, they belong to this car company's name, which is kind of crazy to see all of that. And these are live cars on the road that are automatically connected over the web. So one of the other things that they found running within these car applications was a cryptocurrency mining software, mining program that was running, and it was simply not attacking any of the services or the data that it had access to, but it was simply running another application, which is a cryptocurrency application. It turns out that these attackers walked away with close to $1 million over a period of just under a year, a few months. So that's an example of these applications being very, very spread out and being able to attackers having a much larger attack surface to take on. So what's Gigamon doing about it? We believe we're in a unique position to be able to provide visibility across all of the tiers and what type of applications are running within each of the tiers. And again, we go from being a simple 3-tier to a 10, 15-tier types of applications for digital applications, spanning many, many microservices. So Gigamon Application Intelligence is a brand new technology that we just launched. We believe that this will change the world of network packet brokering, network visibility, access to data dramatically. So let's spend a few minutes talking about this. So first part of digital application visibility is the notion of visualization. So automatically we are identifying over 3,000 different applications that's flowing over your network. So you plug us in, we look at the packets, that's the level of information we have, layers 2 and 3, and we're reporting back layer 4 through layer 7 type of information out of those packets. The second part is application extraction. So I can say I want to extract only my Dropbox traffic and usendit.com traffic or whatever else, and be able to send that off to the right tools for monitoring my shadow IT applications. And it could be a specific application, or it could be a family of applications that I'm monitoring. This is pretty cool where IT can now say that I want to deprioritize these applications. So for example, Spotify, I don't need to send to all of my security tools, but I do need to send these Box.net or Salesforce.com or my internal database queries off to a different set of tools to monitor. And the third part is another area where we believe that this will completely change our industry. It's the ability to extract over 5,000 attributes about applications that we can now send out to other systems to monitor and process and so on. So we grab the data, we extract intelligence, we share that with all the different tools out there, whether it's network performance, APM types of tools, and of course security types of tools. So very, very powerful capabilities. So I wanted to cover the 3 and kind of do a little show and tell of the 3. The first one is around visualization. So instantly when you plug us in, again, we're looking at just at packet level data, and we're reporting back pretty extensive information on what kind of traffic it is, what happens with the traffic, how much volume is going on, who's running these applications. When we turned this on within our own IT department or within our own organization, it was pretty amazing on what we were able to see. A bunch of applications that we probably should be gray listing or watching extra carefully and so on. We had a very, very large retail company visit us right around this beta timeframe. They said, Gigamon, it's awesome that now using Gigamon we can collect all the data and we can see all of the network traffic in one place, but we don't know what kind of traffic it is. Could you tell us, could you provide a way to understand what that traffic is? And it was sort of a perfect answer from our perspective where we said, oh, let us show you this beta software. So anyway, very, very powerful capability to visualize the application. The second step that happens is now that I know what applications are running, what do I do with it? Well, several things. One is the notion of the ability to prioritize and deprioritize applications, but really overall, it's the ability to make sure we have visibility into all of the traffic, north-south traffic, lateral east-west traffic, traffic running between 2 servers sitting in a data center, not even going out to the end users. We can look at microservice traffic between microservices, traffic between public and 2 different public clouds, or within a public cloud VPC. Pulling all of that together in one place and saying these are the applications and this is how it's behaving. And these are the applications I want to be sending to these particular tools. So it's precisely matching your tools to the type of applications. So the tools load could dramatically decrease because, again, you might not want to send Netflix traffic. Hopefully not too many people are watching Netflix at work, but it happens. And you don't need to send that to all of the, all the security tools and overload the security tools, which usually are dependent on capacity. So that's the second thing, visualization, then filtering. The third very cool capability that we have is around metadata intelligence. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this because this is really, really important, really powerful. So not only are we pulling the application information out of the traffic, but we're also pulling metadata intelligence from the traffic. And what this means is within an application what's happening. So for example, this will say that Bassam just started a Facebook application and went to facebook.com, which is, HTTP traffic basically. And so Facebook comes in, Bassam's on Facebook. Oh, wait, he just started a chat window within Facebook. So we will notify that as part of our metadata in real time, saying that chat window started and Bassam is chatting with this friend. And, oh, Bassam's friend just sent him a runme.exe file. So we have the ability, our customers have the ability to take this notion, take this metadata, and send that off to any tool, any third-party tool that can understand metadata, as well as Splunk or QRadar or other SIMs that they have in place. So it's very, very powerful capability to extract from a security perspective. From a user experience perspective, for example, it will also say Bassam went to YouTube, and Bassam started watching a 10-minute long video at 1080p or 4K resolution. And then within, let's say a minute and a half later, Gigamon will report back, whoa, his frame rate dropped to 12 frames per second, and his resolution is now at 420p, 480p. And so all kinds of information about the viewing experience of a video. And it's not just video and such, it's also about SCADA types of applications, and these are ICS, Industrial Control System types of applications. So 5,000 elements is a lot. And not just about elements, the applications themselves, but also about within an application. So I talked about these distributed applications. We will look at the MongoDB, Oracle query, or whatever that's coming into the back end onto our on-premises database. We'll be able to say Bassam sent this request, or the user ID was Bassam sent this request. This is the message, this is the result set that came back. From a timing perspective, this is how long the query took, and so on. So extremely powerful capability for us to provide to all your tools out there. So really, really important. So that's the first thing is what you guys do. The second thing that we're doing, which is even more exciting, is we're building a partner ecosystem that has out-of-the-box functionality with these 5,000 metadata elements and 3,000 applications. What does that mean? So there are lots of really cool tools out there that do analytics based on network traffic. So they'll look at network traffic and determine the user performance, user experience, network performance, security, various parts of security, and so on. Now, with this new data, they're able to go much, much deeper into each of their different areas. So this is in beta mode right now. This is going live. The metadata part's going live at the end of July. We've already have over a dozen partners that have approached us because they heard about this capability. Some are in the SIM space, some are in security, some are in APM, network, NPM space, and they're right now building integrations into our product. So we're very, very excited to have this ecosystem, and then once the product goes live at the end of July, we are going to be building a much, much larger ecosystem of partner base. So extremely powerful capability. So let me kind of start tying it up. Again, feel free to ask questions as you have the questions. So do type those in. And I'm seeing some of the questions coming in already. Thank you. So in summary, from a NetOps perspective, the benefits are pretty incredible. And I'm not saying this, I'm saying this as a reaction to people I presented. So I've talked about, actually live, face-to-face, about 40, 50 different IT organizations. I've demoed this product to almost as many. And as soon as we turn this on and start to see the traffic and what applications are running within traffic, it's a game changer. All of a sudden, the NetOps team understands exactly what's going on. And so at that point, they're able to see what applications are running, what applications they didn't know were running, and be able to troubleshoot from a performance perspective, other perspective, what's going on with the applications. From a security perspective, it's really about prioritizing, deprioritizing. So I don't want to send all of my traffic, all the applications to every single security tool out there, or even based on protocol. For example, my email security might want to see IMAP, MAPI, POP3, but don't want to see the other protocols. We're able to do that level of discrimination without App Intel, but with App Intel, it can get much more specific. So there might be an attachment that you may want to send to a sandbox to go blow up and see if it's malware or not. So very, very powerful capability that's immediately realized by our customers and appreciated by the customers. So moving forward, in summary, application visualization, this is the ability to instantly notify applications, or identify applications rather, over 3,000. Not just applications, but also each application gets grouped into a family of applications. If you have custom apps, you can write your own sort of customization. So once we understand the pattern, we're able to say or identify and show that application along with the 3,000 other applications. I forgot to mention that this is deep packet inspection powered, so we're actually looking inside the package to make the determination. And so it's applications automatically grouped, and also gets your own type of applications defined. The second part is, now that we understand what the applications are, that we can do a very, very powerful brokering of the traffic. We can send the traffic up and down and to the different tools. We can lighten the load on lots of tools, because right now they're seeing traffic that just doesn't make sense for those tools. And from a digital applications perspective, we're able to send all the components of the application, identify what the components have, this Elasticsearch query, this is how long it took, and be able to send that off to the right tool to go to run the analysis. And then metadata is the part where we go really deep, where we're going deep into the application, what the application does, how it's performing, what the user experience looks like, and a lot of that capability. So that's application intelligence in a nutshell. Let me kind of go over a couple of questions, but before I dive into that, we would love for you guys to see what App Intel looks like. We're at several trade shows that are coming up. If you're in any of the major networking or security trade shows, look for Gigamon booth, or just contact us at Gigamon at this URL. We would, again, love to show you how this works and how quickly you're able to leverage this new capability. If you think back at the firewall days, the old firewalls, they did not have application intelligence. It kind of just blocked bad IPs and such. Palo Alto introduced application intelligence in the firewall space several years ago, and as soon as they came up with the ability to identify applications, the game, I guess the industry for firewalls changed pretty dramatically. We kind of went from firewalls to next-gen firewalls based on App ID. In the whole packet brokering world, we expect App Intel to change it just as dramatically. The thing that the ability to understand the apps, and this goes deeper, it's also the metadata it's sharing with everybody else that makes it extremely powerful. So let me take a couple of questions here. The first question, is application intelligence a replacement for third-party APM, so application performance monitoring solutions? The answer is no. So application intelligence, we're in the traffic brokering space, so we get the traffic, we aggregate, we centralize, we clean up the traffic, we will deduplicate packets so you're not overwhelming with same packets multiple times, the same tools. We add a lot of intelligence, we mask, we can slice the packets, and so on. But we will not pull it all together and say this was Bassam's user experience for this application. That's what APMs are there for. So we're the data collectors, but we're empowering these APM tools dramatically more. So without Gigamon in place, in contrast, each APM tool, not just APM, NPM and security and all of these tools would need to tap in or use up one of your span ports in your entire on-premises network. They'd have to have agents or use VPC mirroring or other types of technologies, tap agents, VTAPs from all the public providers, and pull it all together. That's not what these tools, APM tools or security tools, are designed to do. It's kind of a waste of their resources and leads to more problems versus Gigamon doing this. Okay, next question. Are the destination network monitoring security tools able to receive Gigamon App Intel feeds without modifications? Right. So I'm assuming this question is, I already have a stack in place, a tool stack, and does it work automatically with Gigamon? The answer is absolutely yes. So all of these tools process network data, so IP traffic, and what we're doing here with Gigamon is we're clearing up the IP traffic, we're cleaning it up, we're aggregating it, so these tools not only work out of the box, they work much more effectively and efficiently, and you're going to see bandwidth open up instantly because they're not getting, or they'll stop getting traffic that's not relevant for them. So it's very, very powerful. The only exceptions I mentioned, the metadata. This is a feature that's coming out in just a few weeks. So that's one where some of the third parties, are building much, much tighter integration. But to answer your question, your entire tool stack will work 100% out of the box when you put Gigamon in place. Next question, when sending traffic to APM or NPMD tools, will metadata packets be sent there too? The answer is yes. So metadata is an optional module that our customers will buy, so as is the visualization or filtering. So what happens is once application metadata, Gigamon application metadata intelligence is turned on, it will start sending packets over CEF format, which is kind of the NetFlow format. So we append onto that format all of this additional data. So SEP IPFix, we're able to just leverage these existing protocols and be able to send the data in that fashion. All right, let's take maybe one more question or maybe a couple more questions. How's your app-aware solution different than what other context-aware enterprise firewalls vendors provide? Right. So that's a good question. So I mentioned Palo Alto earlier. They're a next-gen firewall tool, and there are a number of edge types of devices that will do application identification. The way we're different is dramatically different. It's philosophy of what Gigamon does versus what other security tools and other analytics tools provide. So what we provide is the ability to gather all the traffic, centralize the traffic, and share all that information with your entire tool stack. What a lot of these next-gen firewall tools will not do is they will not share the firewalls and other technology, the application identification, especially the metadata intelligence with other tools, because they would actually empower their competition. So by sending this information that's kind of unique and helps them do their security work better, they will not share that with other tools in the system. Typically, that kind of goes against their business model. The other set of tools that will also determine what the applications are application performance monitoring, APM tools, but they're also not in a position, at least on a network deployment perspective, to share that widely across tool sets. Okay, let's see a couple more questions from Jeff. Will Gigamon work across platforms? We have applications running burstable capacity between on-prem and cloud. Yes, that is a common deployment for us with a lot of our customers who are starting to move stuff out to the cloud. And a lot of the cloud movement, sometimes cloud is, I hate to use this word, lift and shift. That's a little less of the use case, but the more common use case is I want to move an entire application to the cloud, have it reside from end to end in the cloud. However, the monitoring, having a single pane of glass that pulls all the traffic together so your tool stack can process that, that happens on premises. So from a burstable perspective, absolutely yes. So we have our own cloud taps. We also support Azure VTAP. We also support this actually upcoming, it's going to be launched in a few weeks, AWS's VPC mirroring. So it's their new tap capability. So we support all of these different types of tap options. There are pluses and minuses. For example, Gigamon provides a lot more VPC support, so you can go up to several hundred, I forget the exact number, versus a handful of VPCs that the default vendors provide. So we're able to collect all of the traffic in a burst mode or non-burst mode, be able to centralize visibility into that. So very, very powerful capability. Okay, I'm going to look for one more question if possible, if we have time.
I think we just have time for one more question. Here's a question from Alex. I think he's relatively new to this space, and he's kind of curious as to where, to get started. Do you have any recommendations for people who are new to the Gigamon solution, and specifically, the application intelligent, monitoring? What sort of resources do you typically recommend?
Sure, good question. So the simplest way to handle this, Alex, is to just go to our website, just contact us. We'll walk you through it. We'll handhold you through it. It shouldn't take more than half an hour. That's how we start. Usually the call will go on for about an hour or more afterwards, because we usually get a pretty interested audience. But that's how I would suggest we start, is just go to our website, contact us, and we will walk you through it, through the process. And at a high level, Jeff, what we do is we will centralize visibility into our entire network infrastructure. So it's one point of visibility into all of the data in motion, and there's tremendous power that brings to you.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but really great presentation, Bassam. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For more information on the Gigamon solution, of course, visit gigamon.com. Also, check out the PDF product brief that's available right there in your audience console under the Handouts tab. In fact, actually, that'll just take you to their website. So you can learn specifically about the application intelligence solution. There's a video right there that you can check out, and you can request a demo directly using that link. So now it's time to give away some more prizes. We have got an Amazon $500 gift card going to Jack Ho of California. Congratulations, Jack Ho of California. And another Apple MacBook Air going to Stephen Dal Porto from California. Stephen Dal Porto, you won a MacBook Air, and Jack Ho, you won an Amazon $500 gift card. Got a lot more prizes to give away. 3 more grand prizes, actually 2 more grand prizes and 3 more gift cards. So make sure you stay tuned for those. It's now time for our next presentation on the virtual summit. I'm excited to introduce Alex Pei, Vice President of Products at SaltStack. Alex, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Thanks for being on. Take it away, Alex.
All right. We are very excited to be on this summit and have an opportunity to talk to this group of people about SaltStack SecOps. What we're going to go through today is I'm going to just go through a couple of slides really quickly, probably just about 5 minutes, and then we'll get into a demo, and we want to just show you the product and how it can be used to break down some of the silos and some of the issues that we're seeing as security teams and operations teams are working to solve critical problems within their companies. So the first thing we want to talk about is just as we've been working on this product in the security space and talking to different practitioners, both in the security realm as well as the operations realm. One of the things that we have had brought to our attention over and over is the fact that a lot of companies are using the word remediation. And as we have those discussions with the customers that are trying to use those tools, what they've brought up is the fact that in many cases, it's actually just a report. And that there's a disconnect there between what a report is and actually being able to remediate something. Right? The word remediation, of course, is meant to say we're going to put something back in the state that it was expected to be in. And a report, of course, is just going to give you that insight into what's going on. And so there's just in the terminology that's being used, we see a disconnect between what is being provided typically in a report and what is actually being needed, which is a remediation or an action to be able to do something. And if we look at just some statistics on that, and we look at what the industry is seeing, a lot of times, and with Gartner's statistic here, 99% of the time through the next year, a vulnerability that's been exploited will have been known by the institution that's been exploited, right? They have those reports, they have that information, but the action isn't being taken to protect that company from the problem that they're experiencing, right? And so that disconnect, while it's interesting grammatically or whatever to talk about the difference between a report and remediation, the bigger problem is that the insight's being provided, but the fix isn't being applied. and that becomes problematic for businesses. It becomes a cost. It becomes a major sticking point for these companies. Even more importantly is as black hatters, as people are becoming better at exploiting the vulnerabilities that are surfaced, what we're seeing is a dramatic shift in the amount of time it takes to exploit one of these vulnerabilities. So years ago, a decade ago or so, it took 45 days from a time a vulnerability was known until it was exploited. Today, it's down to about 72 hours, and that is continuing to shrink as bad players or bad actors want to exploit these vulnerabilities that are put in place. Recently, in a discussion with one of our customers, it was told to me that if a machine comes online that has one of these vulnerabilities and it's already known how to be exploited, it takes seconds until that machine is starting to be exploited by those bad actors. And so just knowing that something is wrong is not sufficient, and there needs to be that action or the remediation that takes place. The second problem that we've seen is that there is this ongoing disconnect between the security teams and the IT operations teams. And the thing that's interesting there is it's not necessarily a disconnect in their goal to provide value to the business and to provide assets and speed and security to the business, but really in the way that they go about their work. And that disconnect becomes problematic because it ultimately slows down both teams' ability to deliver what they need to. And so if we look again at another industry statistic, we see that there's this ongoing growing contention between the IT teams and the security teams. And that's mostly due because of a lack of or a difference in priorities and a lack of alignment. And so these two teams, while they are both actively working to fulfill their goals and their commitments to the business, the way they go about their work and their duties is ultimately leading to a disconnect, which can leave those vulnerabilities available to be exploited, which of course then leads to the bigger problem of attacks and vulnerability exploitation. So from a salt stack perspective, one of the things that we really resonate with is this notion that the IT operations teams have got to be more agile as they work, not just to ultimately complete the tasks that they've got in front of them, but also to enable those other teams that they work with. And so with our SecOps releases really goes into kind of fulfilling this triad that we've got here of being able to work with the security and compliance teams to be able to provide stability and most importantly to be agile. And to be agile enough to be able to enable the speed that the security teams need to be able to fulfill their demands, but also be able to maintain the stability that's expected from the business units to have ongoing continuous operations. And so with all that in mind, SaltStack released what we call our SecOps platform, and it effectively has these 4 stages, right? It really comes down to needing to have a continuous compliance capability. And so for the first piece, you simply go in and you're going to define a policy, right? And the nice thing that SaltStack provides is the ability for that to happen either from a security team standpoint or an operations team standpoint. But regardless of who defines it, that needs to be able to be shared across those different teams. Then we run the scan based off that defined policy, and a lot like a lot of the other vendors that are in this space, we can provide a report. We can show you where you've got an issue that can be looked at from a minion, that can be looked at from a specific configuration issue. And then most importantly, SaltStack, because of our kind of heritage in the configuration space and automation space, we can make the changes that need to happen on those machines. And so those operations teams can come in and take that insight that was provided from the security teams and translate directly into a remediation action. So that now the knowing is just the very first step in an ongoing process to remediate. And then more importantly, even than that, is the fact that we can then ongoing enforce this on a scheduled basis to ensure that if something is identified as being out of compliance and it's once fixed, if something changes on that machine, it'll be scanned, it'll be identified again, and it'll be fixed again. And so that's the process that we go through from a SaltStack standpoint at a high level. And like I said earlier, we wanted to go through some slides, but then I really want to jump in and show everybody how this works from a product standpoint, right? Seeing is believing. And so I'm going to go in and we're going to go in through a demo of the SaltStack SecOps. Yeah, let me recreate the policy that we're at. So like I was saying, we're logged in right now as a security user named Sam, and she's going to create a policy for the EU machines. So the first thing I want to do as that security user is create that policy. And so, like I was saying before, one of the key things here is while there is a division of labor, a natural division of labor between the security teams and the operations teams, we believe if we can provide a single tool that allows them to collaborate, that they'll be able to be more effective. And so in this case, our security team is going to create that policy. And so, like I said, we're going to name it the EU hourly. I'm going to then go into the different checks or benchmarks, which we provide out of the box. We're going to go with just the CentOS 7 because our machines are all CentOS 7. And this is where we were when we had the technical issue there. So within each one of those benchmarks, we've got literally hundreds of different checks. So in this case, this is what's defined from the Center for Internet Security. It provides us insight into the different checks that need to be made for a configuration for it to be secure in their definition. So the first thing that Sam's going to do here is she wants to look for maybe a set of specific checks. So all the cron items and let's say all the SSH items or a subset of the SSH items. So she can go in here, select any number of these. And one of the key aspects is that this is going to be unique or customized to her needs. So maybe her company wants to follow the entire CIS standard, but in other cases maybe it's just a subset of that. And so she can come in and select the pieces that are needed for her. And then for each item she can drill in to get additional information. So like I clicked on the ensure SSH access is limited. I can go into the description, I can see what it's going to check. There's a verbose description as well as showing which operating systems that applies to. Additional information, and then what I think is really important is this piece down at the bottom where it's the salt state file. And so this defines exactly what we're going to look for, and if we find an issue, what we're going to do to fix that particular issue. So I'm then going to go in and go to the next screen. Once I've selected those checks, and then at this point Sam can add some additional variables if she wants to for specific checks that she's going to run. And then she's going to go ahead and schedule this. So like we said, this is going to be hourly, so we're going to run this every hour. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So as you can see, we've selected 10 different checks across, or 5 different checks across 10 different machines or so. We want to go ahead and run this assessment. So that's going to go out to each one of those, what we call minions, and it's going to check whether or not it's in compliance. And if it's not, it will report back to us saying that it is not. Now, within SaltStack, we want to provide to you the most versatile set of reports that we can. And so we allow you to look at this either from a check standpoint, or we can drill in and look at a specific minion standpoint. And as I click through this, you'll see that those minions are already reporting back. And we'll give it another few seconds here to get that last minion to come back and report. The other areas we've got is you can set different minions or different checks as being exempt. So while you will scan for them, you might not want to do the remediation itself. And then you can pull up different reports, and of course we show you the activity that's been run on the different machines. So in this case we ran an assessment against 5 different machines. And you know, in that minute of time you can see that we've gotten back the information from those 5 different machines that we ran this against. And you can see which ones were successful and which ones failed. And so in this case we've got one item that was successful and pretty much the rest of them all failed. And of course, we can look at this from a minion standpoint and drill into that and see what was successful or failed for each one of those, giving us insight into where the problems might exist. And we can get an additional information from the different comments there. So in most organizations, this is kind of where the security team's job stops. And this is where you either print off something and hand it off to a security team, or you go and beg and ask for them to make these remediations that you need to have done. Now with SaltStack, this is where we're working to kind of remove that disconnect, right, and take action from the report that's provided. And so at this point, I'm going to shift our view, right? We're going to go back to the other side and look at it from the security team standpoint. Looks like we've got another. Okay, so we're now looking at it from the operations standpoint, or in this case, we'll use the term Ollie as the user that we're working with. And you can see this first screen that he lands on is similar to the one that we had with Sam. The only difference is that he has a lot more targets, right? He's got his security targets that are available, but he's also got operations targets. Within this, if we wanted to click around and had a little bit more time, we could show you the different jobs and things that were done within the operations realm. But the real key here is that within the SecOps standpoint, he has a very similar view to what Sam has. And so there's been some communication, of course, between Sam and Ollie, where Sam said, hey, you know, we set up our EU data center security scans, and we've found that, of course, the initial scan is not very positive. And so we need to run some security compliance stuff. And with that division of labor, we can prevent the security team from being able to run specific jobs that make changes on the machines, right? Using role-based access control, we can define exactly what they can do, which machines they can touch, which jobs they can run, and which ones the operations teams can run. And so in this scenario, what we see is that the operations team is not able to create the security policies, but they're able to scan and do the remediations. From a security standpoint, they are able to create the policies, but they can't do the remediations themselves. So there's that check and balance in that shared work environment that they have, but there's also that division of labor. And so Ollie logs in. He sees a very similar view to what we saw with Sam. The difference is he can remediate these items. So he's going to go in and click remediate all. In this case, we'll just do it really quickly. And so he would remediate all the items. And so at this point, we get a new job that's been kicked off and sent to each one of those machines. And we're going to take the remediation action that would take place there. And so one of the things that we want to always call out with SaltStack is that we are a very cross-platform enabled solution. So regardless of what operating system you're using, whether you're running this in cloud, whether you're running it in containers, SaltStack is able to communicate with those machines and respond back with the information that's needed. The other thing that's exciting about SaltStack is we provide both an agent-based and agentless option as well as a proxy option. So we provide as much flexibility as we can to ensure that you as a customer can pick the solution that's right for your particular environment. So now that we've given that a couple minutes to run, you can see that the remediation has run, and in a matter of seconds, we got the response from those 5 machines. And so we need to kick off another assessment. We'll go and check and make sure that those remediations took place, right? And so from an operations tempo standpoint, the way you can think about this is the operations team doesn't want to report back to security that everything's good and everything's green before the action has actually been fixed. And so they can run that assessment. Ollie can validate that everything that he expected has been fixed and been cleaned up the way he wants. And then when he reports back to the security team that everything's green, he actually knows that everything's green. And so we'll wait for a second as those go and run the specific assessments. And with any good demo, right, everything comes back as compliant. And so at this point, he can return back, call back to Sam and say, hey, we have seen your issues, we've remediated those. You can run your scan and provide your report to your executives or whoever it is that's asking for this hourly scan. Now, one of the other things that's really important here is the fact that as we set this up, Sam set this to run every hour. Now, SaltStack can provide you the ability to run something as frequently or as infrequently as needed. So in this case, we provide that proactive capability to say every hour or maybe every night or every week or every month, maybe there's a certain set of scans that you want to take, right? And the nice thing about that is it provides what we call a confidence window, right? We all know that when that first report is run from the security team and then the IT ops team goes out and makes the change manually, that report of it all being clean is only as good as until the next person logs into the machine. But with this ability to go ahead and scan on a certain periodic basis and make those remediations on that same basis, it allows our customers to have greater confidence in what they're able to do. And one of the things that we see is as customers become more confident with certain checks, maybe there's certain checks that can be automatically remediated, while others you always want to have that human intervention point, right? You want to be able to go in and review or look at those minions and make sure that it's maybe a proper maintenance window or maybe it's a proper time to take those actions. But there's certain ones that you can remediate and close off those vulnerabilities quickly and easily based off of a scan. Or with SaltStack, we're also able to do what we call event reaction or event response. And so we can set it up so that when something goes out of compliance, we receive an event and we automatically do that remediation, right? Again, based off the customer's or the user's comfort level with the check that's being fixed or the check that needs to be looked at that given time. So with that, we'll kind of close off the demo.
Bring up the next slide here with the URL for saltstack.com/secops.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, that ends the demo portion. We would invite anybody that's got any questions to come out to our website. We've got a lot of information that's available through the saltstack.com site. The last slide that we've got here is actually just a quote from one of our customers. talking about SaltStack's ability to replace kind of many different legacy systems and become kind of that common operating picture for a variety of systems. Right, so SaltStack has the ability to do automation. In this case, we're sharing a great use case around SecOps and security automation, but there's a lot of other opportunities that we have with NetOps, IT Ops, and just data center management. And so there's a lot of great opportunity and things that you can learn from the SaltStack website, and we'd appreciate your visits. With that, I'll actually see if there's a couple of questions that I can answer in the last couple of minutes before we run out of our time. So
yeah,
okay. So I've got just a few questions here. The first one is, can you scan tablets and phones? Actually, SaltStack is focused on servers and desktops at the moment, right? So tablets and phones are not endpoints that we currently manage. We can do anything, though, within a data center or that's hosted in the cloud, right? So whether that's Linux, Unix, Windows, any of those operating systems in the server or desktop realm we're able to scan and intermediate with. The next question I see there is how does SaltStack impact the network when it scans? This gets into a deeper discussion that we'll probably want to follow back up with, but as SaltStack works, what we do is we have what we refer to as our master and minion architecture. And so that's built in such a way that it should reduce that traffic, right? And so as we pass jobs down, it makes as few calls as possible to those minions, do all the work that they need to, and then pass up only the pertinent information that's needed. And so we've been able to scale with customers up into the hundreds of thousands of managed nodes without significant impact on that network. And that has to do with that broader architecture that we'd be happy to share more details about and get into greater depth on how that works and how that does impact that network piece. There's a question here from Richard that I'd like to answer. His question is, how different is the open source version from the enterprise version? And so for those who are not aware, SaltStack has an open source community version. And the open version is largely driven from the command line. Well, it's only driven from the command line. And it's an incredibly powerful engine that we base our enterprise product on. And then on the enterprise level, what we're able to provide is a set of what we refer to as enterprise level features. And so that includes a database for data aggregation and storage, role-based access control so that you can have that division of labor between a security team and an operations team and specify who can do what and who has access, and then provide that audit trail from the database piece of it. It's, of course, got the graphical user interface on the enterprise, which you wouldn't have on the open. And then, of course, it comes with SaltStack support. And so those are kind of the key differentiators there between the open and enterprise piece. For this particular demo that we just went through as well, that content that I showed is only available to the enterprise user. So your ability to have those CIS certified benchmarks to be able to run those security scans, those are only, that's a use case that is only available through the SaltStack Enterprise product. So we've got another question here from Don McDaniel, which says, does it also check for vulnerabilities or just compliance within the CIS standards? So there's two parts to this question. Right now, what's available are the CIS compliance scans, and so those are what we've focused on in our initial release in the first part of this year. And then later this summer, we'll have an additional release with additional content that's focused specifically on the vulnerability and patch management aspects. And so, right now the answer to that is we are currently focused on compliance standards like CIS. And then later on this year, we'll have patch management and vulnerability management for all major operating systems. And so this is a growing platform with additional capabilities that will be coming in the near future. All right. So we were grateful for the time. I apologize for the technical difficulties we experienced there for a couple minutes, but it was great to present this and to have these questions, and we look forward to talking to anybody that's interested in the near future.
Yeah, great presentation, Alex. We got lots of feedback about the demo. Everyone loved the demo. Great feedback. And personally, as a fan of user interfaces, I can tell you I really appreciate the beautiful user interface of the SaltStack UI. So thank you for showing that to us today. It looks like you answered every question out there. It looks like another one just came in. Maybe you can get that one as well after we wrap up. But thank you so much for being on the event today, Alex.
All right, thank you.
For more information on the SaltStack solution, of course, visit saltstack.com. Also, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. That is the SaltStack SecOps Handbook. So you might want to download that and check it out if you'd like to learn more. And now it's time to announce our next set of prize winners. We have an Amazon $500 gift card, and that's going out to Gerardo Melendez from Nevada. Congratulations, Gerardo Melendez from Nevada. And our next grand prize is going to Andrew Schneenidigger from Ohio. Andrew Schneenidigger from Ohio. Congratulations. We have a lot more prizes to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter. That is Mr. Jack Bailey, Director of Channel and Sales Enablement at Island. Jack, are you with us?
I'm here.
Thanks for being on, Jack. Take it away.
My pleasure. Hey, so thanks for joining us today. It's my pleasure to be here and excited to discuss with you all the emerging innovation in IT. After all, really change is just one of the constants in our industry. We're always looking to do more, to be more efficient. How do we adapt? How do we ensure resiliency? How do we go beyond our own internal capabilities? And for many organizations, the answer to these critical questions is the cloud. But why innovate in the first place? Well, for many organizations, it comes down to a simple truth. The very success of our business is reliant on seamless and secure availability of critical workloads. But I think we all know that with an organization, what is critical also depends on who you ask. There's been a ton of calls over the years I've been on with each department head stating the importance of their own unique applications to their team, which leads us to the most straightforward driver for IT innovation and demand in our always-on world, and that is our organizations expect it. And to deliver on this goal, we as IT professionals develop our skill sets, we listen to our team members, we select the technology we look at, and of course, we always look to the future for better and more efficient answers to this challenge. In my 15 years of IT, I've seen time and time again how critical evaluation of people and vendors we partner with can lead to our successes or failures. And to me, this is even more true with cloud computing, where we're not just partnering with a company for a piece of our IT needs, but often the infrastructure, the support, the collaboration, and the focus on our future. And while today our topic is on innovation, it can be valuable to know a bit about a company's history when working with them. I've had the pleasure of being at Island for about 8 years, and I've witnessed our success come from collaborating with our customers, our partners, and putting their ideas into action. I love getting on calls like this and being able to speak confidently about our support ratings, the innovation recognition, and know that above all, our products, technologies, and processes lead to what matters the most, which is an amazing customer experience. So let's talk a bit more about the customer experience. As I mentioned a minute ago, Island customers get access to in-house certified 24/7 support and a great onboarding process. We're done in infrastructure with a validated 100% SLA for uptime, using VMware vSphere, NSX, and Cisco technology. And what I love about this is it provides a turnkey, intuitive experience for our customers. The skill sets, the technologies they know and leverage in-house can immediately be consumed with the Island Cloud Platform. This is offered across 9 global sites that provide geo-redundancy while maintaining data sovereignty. Each site has carrier-neutral meet-me rooms with SD-WAN, MPLS, Megaport integration, so you can connect all your infrastructure or your multi-cloud deployments. And the flexibility in pricing is really nice. You have the ability to do reservation models, burst models, or blended price models as well. Every Island offering has built-in antivirus, vulnerability scannings, and on-demand reports, which are all accessed through a single interface based on RESTful APIs that allow us to integrate in deeply with additional technology partners, which we'll discuss here in just a moment. This is all while meeting about 20 industry compliancy standards, which is one of the highest in the industry, and offering the highest levels of availability. And while there is a number of solutions Island provides to our customers, including production, Office 365, backup as service, and object storage. Today we're going to focus specifically on disaster recovery. So what does the customers expect from DR offerings? Well, of course they expect live failure, and especially critical in today's ever-increasing presence of hyperscaler clouds, the ability to fail back. This is where a VMware-based cloud comes in handy, of course. Doing non-intrusive testing as part of an ongoing validation cycle for your processes. Apologies on that, I wasn't clicking for just a moment there. Consumption-based billing, which is huge for offering the ability to only pay for storage while you're leveraging it, and only pay for compute as you need to in a DR type scenario. And then of course the ability to get down to 15-minute or lower RPOs, which means in terms of gaps in production, fewer than 15 minutes with near instant recoverability. So each of these are core components of a successful disaster recovery strategy. But how do we do more using the key components of the Island Secure Console? Well, we do this by taking advantage of innovative approaches to otherwise unused value of our backup and data provides. For the remainder of the presentation today, we'll shift more to discussing formulas for activating your data with Island. Now you might be thinking, well, what does this mean? And the answer to this is going beyond data protection or an insurance policy that provides significantly more value to your company even if an outage never occurs. And while there's a number of examples, there are 5 formulas we'll discuss today. The first of these is on-demand, non-intrusive vulnerability assessments. So let's set up the use case on this one. This one can be really valuable for your organization. Of course, the ability to have proactive and reactive strategies for threats is critical. And an important proactive strategy is to perform routine assessments of the current health of your systems. But often organizations are faced with 2 key challenges to addressing this. 1, lacking the technology or integration to perform a complete scan for vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, or even more. And secondly, the overhead of running scans and tests against production systems. Where Island comes to play is we help address both of these challenges by allowing customers to leverage near-instant instantiation of their protected guests in the Island Secure Cloud Console while leaving their production systems and end-user access unimpacted. The activated copies of the data can sit on isolated test networks where they can have the scans and testing run against them, allowing for the creation of detailed, automated reports through our Island Secure Console interface, all while business continues as normal for production workloads. The end result is an end user that benefits from constant, uninterrupted access to systems and data while maintaining the integrity of their data as well. Let's take a look at the second approach to activating data. This is for business critical applications to benefit from routine consistency checking. But there can be multiple hurdles to this in reality, some of which include the impact to production workloads, especially databases, while performing consistency checks, or a lack of high-performance resources to run checks on separate systems, and a lack of automation when performing these steps. Island can help address both of these challenges in multiple ways. The first way is by providing customers with API accessibility in the Island Secure Cloud Console. It's actually possible to automate the activation of workloads on our platform such that a DBA could potentially script the test process for the database consistency check to not only run the consistency check, but also to trigger the accessibility and availability of those test workloads in a single flow. Secondly, customers replicating the Island gain access to high-performance resources that can be used for short or long-term purposes. The great end result here is one where a customer, let's say a DBA as an example, can use their scripting to kick off the instantiation tasks on Island, connect to the guest, run the database consistency check against high-performance compute, and clean up all the resources in an automated and repeatable fashion. Let's discuss the third approach to activating data. This would be using protected data copies for operating system and patch testing. The use case is pretty straightforward, but critically important. So the idea here is for users to be able to leverage current copies of their data in an offline, non-service impacting way to validate the behavior of patching operating systems or applications prior to performing these tests on the production systems. Here, an end user can spin up a copy of their current systems to Island, power on the guest, and use on-demand snapshots through the Island console to allow for easy rollback and retries as needed. Once validated, the end user can simply apply these settings to the production site as well. Let's discuss the fourth approach to activating data. This is using protected data copies for user acceptance and testing. The use case can seem pretty straightforward, but there's usually a big challenge in a distributed model. For example, if I want to do user acceptance testing, QA, or some other mechanism of validation, and I have teams across multiple cities or countries or continents, then providing access to the end user can actually become quite complex and frustrating. Island offers a great approach to this. You can use specific copies of the data sets to predefine networks that allow for non-service impacting access to the production systems or to the DR systems, but in a way where the end users have seamless and secure access to the applications. The key component here is Island provides customers with the ability to have customized networking options. For example, they can leverage the integrated NSX, client, and SSL VPN capabilities that Island offers in the secure console interface, or they can use a bring-your-own approach to physical or network or virtual network appliances that allow for usage of VPN, routing technologies, MPLS, point-to-point connections that all leverage the capabilities for sites to seamlessly connect and communicate with each other, which can be key for the collaboration and end-user access needed to make this work. The fifth example of these is data forensics. Let's set up the interesting use case for this one. In an actual DR event, getting your data back online is definitely the most critical task. But understanding what led to that outage can be a critical component as well. And unfortunately, many times in the process of recovering, an end user, in their effort to restore access to the data, loses access to the impaired machine or resources and thus doesn't have any ability to do a root cause analysis or an RCA. While Island provides customers the capability of providing near-instant recovery of guests and applications, we also offer customers the ability to restore isolated copies of their applications to previous points in time to allow for a root cause analysis against the impaired machine. So the idea here is complete a failover test, even after a failure has occurred, or even if an on-site recovery has occurred, complete a failover test to a specific point in time that's reflective of the error. You can select additional points in time as needed. After all, with a 15-minute RPO or less, gives you a lot of flexibility to find the point in time that needs to be selected. Bring that test copy online, and then utilize Island security tools. This includes antivirus, anti-malware, intrusion detection, web status, web health, and be able to create reports from this. The goal of this example would be for a customer to proceed with recovery, utilize Island for this capacity post-recovery, and select a point-in-time recovery of the impacted copy of the data to perform a post-mortem RCA while your end users have access to production resources. Again, to me, this is a great use case because time and time again, we get the recovery online, but don't quite get to see what led to the outage, what led to the impact that caused the outage event, and that can be equally critical to finding out what went wrong and how to prevent it from occurring in the future. So let's walk through some visuals to show you what this looks like in action. Well, I'd love to do a live demo with you as well. We're going to use some slides today to walk through this quickly and wrap up with some of our Q&A here. So whether you're using the Island Secure Cloud GUI interface or our API, kicking off the actual test failover to gain access to the virtual resources is incredibly intuitive and fast. It takes a simple couple clicks to specify if it's a test failover, if it's a live copy of the data, and what point in time you want to restore to as part of that process. Users have full visibility of the status and progress of each of the tasks along the way. And once an activated copy of the machine is online, an end user has full control and full visibility to the compute, networking, and performance aspects of the guest, just like in production. So I can modify any element of this, whether it's the compute, CPU and RAM, the storage pieces of it, changing IP address, or just seeing the overall health of the guest while it's running online. This includes instant console access for in-guest operations. And this can be ideal if you're doing isolated networking or completing updates or patches, which could cause reboots or disconnection. To me, I can't stress this enough. When we're doing things like offline testing, validation, QA, oftentimes the various activities we're performing will cause network outages or disconnections. So having console access at all times is absolutely key to making these successful during that process. Gaining access to scans and vulnerability information is really easy to do and very easy to understand. At a glance, I can see the health of my organization and click through to take action. Each of the attributes on the summary page can be configured for more granular control and more customization. For example, clicking on the vulnerabilities page allows me to see events over time or configure settings. In this case, I can perform an on-demand scan, I can configure who gets notified, and the threshold for the events. I can also exclude guests as needed. Once scans have been complete, I can generate a report showing me details about anti-malware, computer issues, reboots, clock changes, firewalls, integrity monitoring, log inspection, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, and web reputation. So an incredibly detailed, very robust reporting capability there. And of course, it goes without saying, networking can be absolutely critical to the success of testing, failovers, and doing more with your replicated data. As we mentioned previously, with Island, it's possible to use intuitive VMware NSX-based networking configuration through our secure console for configuring things like client VPN, SSL VPN, public IPs, DNS, all those normal settings. But it's also critical to know that you can bring your own device, virtual or physical, for additional integration options. As we mentioned before, MPLS, point-to-point, and others, which can be really, really nice for a multi-cloud solution or for integrating for a hybrid cloud type capability as well. So seen here is an example of managing in the Island console the networking for virtual guests using the NSX-based connectivity. I can easily configure IP settings, VPN configurations, and segmentation as well. Each of these items leads to a seamless connection, whether an end user wishes to maintain, modify IPs during activation, use public or private connection options. Just to go into a tiny bit more detail here as well, what's nice, what's nice is the ability for, during a test scenario, an end user to maintain their internal IPs and have this be on an isolated network, which still has connectivity through the console or a back-end connectivity through VPN gateways, while also having production networks set up so that if it's a production failure type event, being able to leverage on demand the same IPs with pre-configured public IPs for access on demand as well. As we mentioned, Island also uses a RESTful API that's exposed to our customers, allowing them to automate tasks related to the console or to integrate in existing tools. We discussed automating test failures as an example. There are actually hundreds of additional commands that can be performed programmatically. Island has GitHub pages and Swagger interfaces that can allow for faster integration. So whether using our GUI, our API, or Island management, there's a number of different ways you can get value from your data. You can find out more by going to island.com or by using our live chat to get connected. Happy to answer any questions you may have on this and appreciate your time.
Great presentation, Jack. Yeah, we do have some questions here for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm going to pop up a poll. And the poll for everyone out there says, what additional information would you like about the Island Veeam solution? And there's a number of options there. So let's see, first question that came in they're asking about, can you see things like bot activity on a web server? I guess the question might be, do you have any insight into what's going on the virtual machines that you're protecting once they're restored?
Yeah, apologies about that. I was muted. So yeah, that's a great question. So you certainly can see quite a bit on the virtual machine when they're restored in the environment. Again, whether it's been restored through backup as a service through Veeam, disaster recovery as a service through Veeam, or just production guest through Island. So we use Tenable Nessus, we use Trend Micro, and we use a number of other tools as well. The idea there is you can show malware behavior, virus behavior as part of that process, but there is also intrusion protection and intrusion prevention and detection that can be run as well. And one of the things I did not show in the presentation, apologies for not showing that live, is you can actually also do on-demand web penetration testing as well. So there's a number of different ways to gain that information. It'd be wonderful for the person to have that question to be able to do a quick live demonstration or to send them a sample report as a follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Another question here, Don is asking, can Island work with an existing instance of Veeam backup? So if they're already using Veeam, how would that work?
Absolutely. Incredibly seamless integration. So there's a couple products that Island provides that integrate into Veeam. One of them is Island Secure Cloud Backup powered by Veeam. This is the ability for a customer with an existing Veeam integration to take their current repository, which is on-site or at another location, and then ultimately send a copy of that to Island with still the ability to do granular search and restore. The really nice thing about this is within the Veeam interface, you simply can go to the cloud provider's area of it, put in your Island information, where we'll create a secure connection between your site and ours, and be able to begin ingesting that data immediately to be able to leverage that. It's also worth noting that on our Island webpage, if you look at our disaster recovery or backup as a service offerings, we do offer a 30-day test drive with 5 terabytes of free data as part of that test drive process. There's no credit card required, so if a customer wants to leverage that, they can immediately point their existing Veeam solution to leverage Island instantly with no commitment required. We also have disaster recovery as a service options as well, where a customer can leverage the replication capabilities of their on-prem Veeam resources to Island to be able to also do some of the components we talked about today, right? Activating that data, instantiating those workloads, or a combination of the two. Customers that have Veeam are absolutely welcome. We let them use their existing Veeam licenses and simply charge them for the storage utilized in that backup capacity. We also can provide Veeam licensing to customers who are looking at Veeam for the first time and want to consume that as a monthly rental cost as well.
Okay, excellent, very nice. And I know this is primarily about Island and Veeam today, but Paul is asking, does Island only work with Veeam, or could it work with other backup solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a number of different technologies we leverage. It's one of the reasons that we're typically seen as a leader in many of the quadrant-based information and analysis reports out there. There are probably about 3 or 4 additional technologies we leverage, which are on our website that can be seen there. But if you have a specific technology, we can typically support it. We also are pretty consultative in the approach, where if you have a certain use case where that use case is more driven around how fast you want to recover, the length of time you want to keep data for, we can typically direct you to the correct technology, which is often Veeam, but in some cases may not be.
Okay, nice. And then another question here, Jesse's asking, and maybe this is kind of an architectural type question, is there a native connector or EC2 AMI instance for AWS? Would you use Island to back up an instance in AWS, or what do you recommend there?
Yeah, so great question. So I want to break that up in 2 parts real quick. Island is a VMware-based cloud provider. So typically when a customer is replicating or recovering to Island, it's going to be in a VMDK or VMware format. If a customer does have AWS data or Office 365 data or even Azure-based data, they can leverage connectors through Island to protect those environments as well. We have a really, really nice Office 365 offering, but do have the ability through a connector to protect Amazon machine images or Azure-based VHD disk-based systems as well. And we can definitely provide more information there.
Excellent. You all have all the bases covered. I like that. I just learned that right now. So very cool. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for now, but really great presentation, Jack. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Absolutely. I apologize for any audio glitches during it, but thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to talking to you all in the future.
For more information on the iLand and Veeam solution, check out the Essential Guide to Cloud Backup and Disaster Recovery. It's right there in your Handouts tab. You can click and download that 27-page ebook with a lot more details, and make sure you check that out. So with that, it is time for another prize giveaway. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Michael Cook from Indiana. Congratulations, Michael Cook from Indiana. And after our keynote and then our final presentation, we'll have another gift card and another Apple MacBook Air to be announced as prize giveaways. So make sure you stay tuned for those. And now I'm excited to introduce Ned Bellavance, again, Microsoft Azure MVP, Pluralsight author, and Mr. Scott D. Lowe of Actual Tech Media with a really cool interview here. I think you'll enjoy this.
Hi, I'm Scott Lowe with Actual Tech Media, and I am here with Ned Bellavance, and we're going to talk about something that's probably near and dear to many of your hearts, and that's keeping up with your skills and keeping up with what's happening. I am aware that IT changes every once in a while.
I've heard that. One might call it sort of a hamster wheel.
It's always been that way, and it's probably never going to change.
People keep talking about it accelerating. I think it's about the same as it's always been.
Oh, I think it's accelerated. That's my opinion.
I don't know if it's accelerating. It's more expanding.
It is expanding.
There's
you know what?
So many different fields that you could consider under the umbrella of technology.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, you've got data scientists and AI and machine learning, and then you've got storage-centric and cloud-centric and IoT and all these different little like subgenres of tech. And it's how do you keep up with the larger field and then in your specific field?
Yeah, and I think the way you put it is great. Expand it, but each individual area is still doing its own little hamster wheel.
Yeah, still churning out. So yeah, if you're cloud, because that's what I tend to get into. I'm like a cloud specialist, if you want to call it that. It's really hard to keep up with all the service announcements that come out of AWS and Azure and Google. I mean, Google Next is happening right now, and I'm sure there's a laundry list of things that have come out, and it's going to be really hard to digest all of those announcements and then the stuff that Azure and AWS are going to like dump on top of you as well.
So if I'm an IT guy, IT gal, IT person, whatever you happen to be, then what do I do these days? I mean, there's still certifications, there's still training courses, but companies don't want to send people off to weeks of training anymore.
Right, and I don't think sending people off to weeks of training was necessarily valuable.
No, I never found it that valuable.
A lot of the stuff that you learned at that like sleepaway camp of whatever, you lost within like a week of coming back because you weren't using any of it.
Right.
You learned a whole bunch of theoretical knowledge and a lot of practical stuff that you can't apply to your day job. So it just goes away because you have to focus on the things that actually matter to you. So that's probably the number one place to start, is for IT pros to focus on the things that are valuable to their job role that they have today and the job role that they want tomorrow.
And so they have to figure out what they want to do tomorrow. It's a challenge in and of itself.
Right.
And they have to be able to be willing to think about what they want to do tomorrow beyond what I'm doing today.
Right, which can be hard when you're putting out fires 24/7. But
absolutely.
I know that's a challenge and a frustration. So it's probably good to sort of dip your toe in a few things and see what seems interesting. And an easy, low friction way to do that is podcasts.
Yeah?
Yeah. We all have a commute or a workout or something like that we have some downtime where we're not doing work. That's an opportunity for you to listen to some technical podcasts and kind of get a sense of what's going on out there in the world and what you might want to dive into. So that's maybe one avenue to do it.
I've heard of this company, Pluralsight. You heard of them?
Might have heard of them.
One of the things I like about their model is that you can get very discreet. I want to
Yes.
know about this aspect of this technology, and you can go find a module to learn.
Right. So, I mean, their format is to have a getting started course or a foundations course, and then have more deep dive courses on specific aspects of a technology. So, you know, if you're paying for a membership for something like Pluralsight, you have access to the entire course catalog. You can literally just, okay, I want to watch the intro module for the foundations of Ansible course. Do I care about Ansible? Is this something that, you know, seems interesting, useful at work, or useful in my professional life? If it is, awesome. Watch the rest of the course. If not, you've only spent 10, 15 minutes. You can crank up the dial and watch it at 2.5 speed if you can handle it.
Right.
and just kind of get a feel for, is that something that I think will help me in my career, or I want to, you know, get more into?
I like the idea you just put forth that you can kind of try it out. And that's one of the nice things about Pluralsight's model is that it's a monthly fee, so it doesn't matter how much you watch or how little you watch. Personally, I think another way that people can keep up with the market in general is to watch Megacast, EcoCast, and Virtual Summits by Actual Tech Media.
Yeah.
Trademark, just kidding. But there are lots of those kinds of opportunities, virtual events and things like that are out there today as well.
And I would caution against watching a webinar or something that's put on by a specific vendor. Because obviously they're just going to talk about their technology, how awesome it is, and how everybody else's technology is kind of garbage. That's not particularly helpful when you're just trying to get a sense of what's out there and where technologies are headed.
Agreed.
I would go for more the independent or multi-vendor presentations where you get a broader view of where the market's going and what interesting things are happening in technology, and just not just the speeds and feeds of Joe's blazing new 2U server.
I agree with you. In fact, one of the rules we have around our events is they have to there's a non-disparagement clause in the contract, and I'm not kidding. One of the rules is that you have to stick to your own technology. Now, we've had occasions where vendors slipped up, you know, that happens, but we try to keep our events focused on the topic at hand and not on bashing competition, because people don't want to watch that. They don't want to, that's not how they're going to learn.
Right. No, you're not being informative if all you're doing is, you know, bashing the other person's product. That's not helpful for anyone, really.
So, you know, let me just ask you this. I mean, you have done a lot of courses for Pluralsight. I've done courses in the past. It's been a while. But what do you find? Like, do you find them beneficial to you from a learning perspective, creating those courses?
Yeah, actually. You might think you're an expert in a topic until you actually have to explain it to somebody else. And
I know.
Go, I actually don't know how that works. So
then you got to go figure it out.
And then you got to go figure it out. So in the journey to develop a course, I end up learning a lot more about the topic than I knew before. I mean, obviously I had to have some base level of knowledge in order to outline a course and get it ready. But when I'm diving into the minutia of a demo or trying to explain to someone, you know, different storage technologies in Azure or something, oh, well, I actually have to really know what I'm talking about so I can feel confident about saying it on something that's going to be recorded and watched by, you know, potentially thousands of people.
They'll catch you.
They'll catch me. They might call me out on that.
Yeah, and you can't be an expert at everything. So
no, absolutely.
I think people are generally kind enough to understand that.
Yes, and most people, you know, they'll leave a comment, hey, you know, this is a little bit different or a little bit wrong, and I'll try to correct it, you know, whenever possible. But yeah, I mean, the process of doing a presentation or developing a course forces you to think more deeply about a topic and learn it a lot better. So if you are starting to go down a particular avenue on a technology, find a user group that, or you know, try to submit a paper for a conference or something that you want to present on. That will force you, or at least hopefully force you, to really dive into the technology and know it front to back. So when you get up in front of those people, you feel confident about what you're talking about.
I know how you feel about having to learn as you go to a point. I learned System Center Configuration Manager because of a course I created for pre-Pluralsight Train
There's
Signal.
a support group for that.
I know. Believe me. I'm painfully aware sometimes because I used to do some consulting around that too, and it's just like, why do people do this to themselves?
It's a mystery. Well, at least you weren't doing SCOM.
Actually, I was. I was doing both.
Fair enough.
And along with Microsoft Data Protection Manager at the same time. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's where the drinking problem came from.
Yeah, I had to. That's. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say any more than that because I'd probably violate something.
Probably. And I'm sure there's SCOM administrators out there just screaming about the fact that their product's awesome. And I'm glad that they like it.
Done well, and if you really know what you're doing, it can be good.
Yes.
But anyway,
the learning curve is steep.
Very steep for both.
Yes.
But we went way off topic here. So
a little bit.
If you're an overworked IT pro, what are like the top 3 things that you think they need to do right now to start thinking about tomorrow and to continue to enhance their skills, especially if they're in an environment where they're overworked and they don't have a lot of time for training and things like that?
Right, yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? When you're in an overworked job where you're being asked to do too much with too little, I think prioritizing a little bit and being willing to say no. It's really hard to do, and a lot of us that are in IT want to jump in, we want to be the hero, we want to help out, but at a certain point we have to say, no, I can't do that, or if you want me to do that, it's going to take a realistic amount of time. Push back and make that space for you to learn and progress. If you're in a situation where your company can't be supportive of that, short term you kind of have to deal with it, but long term, look for a company that is supportive of the concept of you progressing in your career and as an IT professional.
Very good. Ned, thank you for this great conversation.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure being on.
Really cool interview there with Ned Bellavance and Mr. Scott Lowe. And now it's time for our final presenter on today's event, and that is Mr. Eric Krohn, technology evangelist and all-around security expert, as well as all-around awesome guy from KnowBe4. Eric, are you there?
I am here. Thanks for the nice intro.
Thanks for being on. Good to have you again. Take it away.
All right. Sounds good. Well, today, my part here, we're going to talk a little bit about the levers of human deception, right? I love this talk. This has to do with social engineering and kind of the science and stuff behind it. I'm going to warn you right now, we're going to go pretty fast through this, but as I understand, you'll get a link to this. If you want to go back and read some of these slides in depth afterwards, you'll get a link to the recording. So that being said, let's move forward here. About me, a little bit about me. I'm an IT and security guy. I've been around since the mid-1990s, worked with Department of Defense, various other sectors in healthcare, other things like that. Seen a lot of interesting things in my time, but a key one has been that humans have been a major issue in our organizations and in security in general. So I've kind of taken it upon myself to go out and try to help share some of my knowledge about this and get people to understand why we're still fighting this battle that we seem to be in with the human side of things. I work for KnowBe4. We're based out of the Tampa Bay area, Clearwater, Florida. It's a little bit warm here right now, but otherwise beautiful. We're pretty much a leader in our space for security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. Been around since 2010, and right now I think we got around 25,000 customers. So we're not a small organization. We see a lot of really cool stuff because of the diversity of our organization and all of the different customers that we have, and we get to hear these stories. We get to see the things that are going on. So a lot of this, what I'm going to be talking about here, comes from that, right? All of the incredible things that we see and the way that these social engineering attacks just keep getting better and better. That being said, I want to start off with this. All warfare is based on deception. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, right? I know we've seen this before, but I think it's important to understand that when it comes to these sorts of attacks, especially with phishing, this is based on deception. It's based on messing with people, tricking them, getting them to do things that they wouldn't normally do because they think something else is going on. So it is a thing that we need to think about when it comes to this. Now, we know that about 98% of attacks rely on social engineering. We know that 91% of successful malicious data breaches start with the spear phishing attack. So there's like huge numbers around this. And we just know that the attackers are going for the low-hanging fruit, which happens to be the humans. Technology is pretty good these days. We got some pretty good fortifications, regardless of where your quote-unquote perimeter is these days. We're doing a pretty good job protecting from the outside. The problem is once they get inside, things tend to go off the rails a little bit, and that's where attacking the human comes into play. If they can get a person to do an action and then leverage their credentials and their ability to browse around the network to wreak havoc, that seems to be working pretty well. So we're going to talk real quickly about perception versus reality dilemma, the OODA loop, how the attackers use or try to subvert the OODA loop, and then how do we defend ourselves. So let's start with perception versus reality dilemma. I'm going to do something you may or may not have ever seen before. Through the power of PowerPoint, we're going to do a magic trick here. So this one's pretty straightforward. I'm going to have you pick a card, pick any card, just pick the card really quick here, and I'm going to make it disappear. Did your card disappear? I'm betting it did. And I'm betting it did because what we did is we played a little trick on you. How do we remove it? Well, we started with this deck of cards and we ended with this deck of cards. What do you see about them? Well, they're completely different sets of cards, but by rushing you through the process, you probably didn't notice. They're also set up in a pattern with the, red king, black king, red queen, et cetera, left to right. The color patterns and the busyness of it are designed to distract you from what you're seeing. That's how your card disappeared during that wonderful illusion in PowerPoint, right? This is about getting you to focus on one thing and then distracting you while we change everything underneath it. This is something that the attackers do very, very well. Now, when it comes to deception, one of the things that people really misunderstand these days is the fact that reality isn't always real. Okay, our brains, we have filters. We've developed these through our lifetime, growing up, our culture, our families, just our life experiences have told us if something happens, we expect something else to happen, right? These filters get in there and they start kind of, they change your reality sometimes. This is how people have two very, very different outlooks on certain things, is our brain doing this filtering, right? Now, it seems like it's a little bit crazy, but how many of you remember this, right? When we're talking about reality, what color is the dress? Well, you got two people sitting there looking at the same screen, and they see two different colors, right? I always saw the blue and black. My wife saw the white and gold. I'd like to point out, since she's not on here, I was right. But the fact is, we could see these two different things right here because our brain filters things. And each of us were so very, very sure about what we were seeing that was our reality. Just like the audio clip, the Yanni or Laurel audio clip, right? That was pretty popular. What was interesting about that is both of those sounds were in there, but when your brain picked out one of those sounds, it pretty much completely filtered out the other one. It was extremely hard to hear. Now, there's some of this that deals with our physical characteristics as well, with our vision, with our hearing, but these are ways that this sort of reality thing, if you don't think can be manipulated or can be wrong, honestly, this is some examples of how that happens. We just need to understand that about ourselves, that what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste isn't always real because it goes through those sets of filters. So with the OODA loop, we're going to talk about that here in a second. First thing I want to do is step through these real quick. When it comes to the OODA loop, part of it is observing, okay, and orienting. Those are a couple of things in here. These are some examples through the CIA Manual of Trickery and Deception about how you can use the brain strengths against you and orienting things and distraction again. In this case, they're talking about how to drop things in a drink by placing a ball of fire in front of your face, right? Very distracting. Gets your focus on that. Makes people not pay attention to what's going around, right? Your observation and your orientation pieces are missing in this. Same with this is demonstrating how a look, how a person looks. If they look tired, if they look disheveled, if they don't look alert, you don't necessarily see them as a threat. So these are all things, again, through observation. We see things around us, and our brain filters things and tells us. That doesn't mean the guy on the right, even though he looks really tired, isn't actually alert and listening to what we're saying. It just means that our brain automatically filters them out as a threat due to our past and our experiences and in many cases, just instinctual matters. So these are things that are interesting to understand. These attack what's called the observed part of the OODA loop. So let's get into that a little bit. spies, magicians, pickpockets, con artists, all these people, they use the principles we're about to discuss, this OODA loop principle, okay? And the OODA loop was kind of cool. It's a model for decision making based around aviation. John Boyd was the creator of this around aviation warfare, right? And if you look in the visor here, you see he's flying close formation with other planes around him. This is a place where your decision making needs to be perfect, right? These are the Blue Angels, obviously, incredible pilots, go Navy. And again, one little mess up here when you're flying this close formation could cause havoc. So your decision-making process needs to be something that is moving very, very quickly, and it needs to be working very, very well. Well, the OODA loop, this is, again, designed for aviation and military aviation and battles. This is something that's actually been used and applied to business processes and all that. But basically, the OODA loop is observe, orient, decide, and act, OODA. So the observe is basically you look around, you see what's happening. You orient, which is where am I now and where do I want to be? Then you make a decision about what do I do to get where I need to be. You do that action, and then you repeat the process, okay? So now you observe, orient, did I move where I need to be? Do I still need to be here, et cetera, et cetera? You get the idea, right? But this is, it's a constant loop in decision making that we're doing. Now, one thing I would like to point out on here is the first three sections of those, the OOD part, are all part of critical thinking. So if you can bypass those first three pieces there, you can drive people straight to an action that you want. Or if you can corrupt those somehow, make the observation different, make the orient different where they are, or impact the decision, you can ultimately really do a number on what's going to happen here. Now, I hope this is making sense to you when we're talking about deception. You get in there, you twist those sorts of things, and next thing you know, people are making the action or taking the action that you would like them to take. So how social engineers, scam artists, how they do this through subverting these components? Well, let's start off with this. This is one of my favorite TV shows out there, at least through season 2. Season 3, things started jumping the shark. But anyways, this is from Mr. Robot. If you've never seen this, the series is really cool. It actually deals with real attack scenarios, real tools. This isn't CSI Cyber where they sit down and, someone flails at the keyboard for a couple of minutes trying to get through a firewall, and then in their best hacker voice they say, "We're in." This isn't one of those shows. This is actually using real attacks, real methodologies, a lot of them social engineering. But I love this quote: "Never found it hard to hack most people. If you listen to them, watch them, their vulnerabilities are like a neon sign screwed into their heads." This is very true. If you talk to people, if you work with people, if you see people and watch them close enough, you can see pretty well how they react to different things. This is their vulnerabilities. In other words, if I'm aggressive with them, do they push back or do they just give in and tell me whatever I want? Those are some things that you want to look at. Are these people prone to helping other people? Are they not prone to helping other people? These are all things that you can exploit. And this is the sort of thing that attackers know and need to know. So the ideal situation for a social engineer is to hijack that OODA loop by creating the knee-jerk reaction, getting through those first three steps like I mentioned, right? And a couple of examples of this is something like this, okay? These were out a couple, last year around the campus shooting times. Everyone was riled up about that. It was a very, very emotional situation for a lot of people. So the attackers started sending these out. This is a real one here. That we got in a report. The attackers had figured out what email system the school used and then sent this out to the people in the school. An emergency scare reported earlier on campus. Kindly go through the memo released and please, the outline protocol here. Basically what it did, though, is it sent them to a fake login page that's going to steal their credentials. Then they can get into the actual email account and start doing attacks from there. But the idea here, and like those other variants that we saw over there too, is you get people riled up, you get them upset, you get them angry, emotionally impacted by this, and they're going to do things without paying attention to, is this really the Microsoft login screen? That's a way that they do this. And they don't care if it hurts your feelings. They don't care if all this stuff makes you very, very upset. That doesn't matter. They're simply attacking and want their way in. When we talk about business email compromise, it's interesting here. Many of these types of attacks have no payload. They're very targeted, they're personalized, and they really have very few traditional tells, right? Like the grammar errors, things like that. These make it very hard for these types of emails to be caught by some of the spam filters. But really, when you're talking about business email compromise, like wire transfer fraud, and that's basically where someone pretends to be the CEO, hits up somebody in finance and says, I need you to send money to this account. That's kind of the short straw, but usually there's some sort of an action behind that. It's an email that says, like, did you get my earlier email? When they reply, sir or ma'am, I don't see that. Then it's the quote-unquote CEO saying, I can't believe you messed this up. I asked you to send money to this earlier today. We're going to end up losing this deal. I got to go fix your problems, et cetera, et cetera. These get very emotionally charged and cause people to skip their critical thinking pieces, go right to the action, which is wiring out money. Same thing happens with data as well. It's not always just about money. So, for example, W-2 fraud. We get people trying to pretend to be an executive, and folks are afraid to push back against executives a lot of times. So they request things like the W-2s for everyone in the organization. We see these around first quarter of the year quite a bit. They get this, they turn around, they file the taxes on behalf of the people. It's just a nightmare and a mess. But they've used the authority of the boss to trick people into getting people to take these actions again, all right? Invoice and PO phishes, same sorts of things. These get mixed in with everything that's going on. They lull you into a false sense of security where you're not applying critical thinking. Next thing you know, you're clicking on the link, and bad things are happening to you, right? Again, another way to do this, in this case, though, instead of getting people upset, what it's actually doing is it's blending in with that mundane everything that's going on, and so people stop thinking critically about that when they're bored as well. So that's why these are very effective. And then same thing with these. We see these all the time. The fact is, these are easy to spot. This one from FedEx, it's test one at merchminer.com. Guess what, folks? FedEx has their own domain name. They don't really need it to come from MerchMiner. But again, these are designed to kind of fit into the stuff that's happening every day, and they just get to not thinking about it. So clickbait, you see these ads everywhere. You won't believe what they caught the cashiers doing. This is based on science, actually. It's called the information gap theory. Basically, they tell you a little information, deprive you of the answer, makes you curious and want to click on things. The psychology behind this obviously works because most of the ads we see are like that these days, right? Some of them are meant to anger people, upset people, get them to do things. We know that there's been malicious ads taken out, malvertising that causes problem, and they usually leverage this kind of approach. Now, how do we defend against all this kind of fun? This is what I like to tell people. If you see an email or you get a phone call that elicits an emotional response, right? This is the IRS. We're going to arrest you if you don't, pay us in iTunes gift cards before the end of my shift. All this kind of stuff. That sort of stuff is triggering an emotional response. If you get a trigger for an emotional response, step back, take a breath, and really try to look at this, making sure that you're running through those critical thinking steps, right? You're looking at these, not just being driven to an action. That's one of the key things I can tell people when it comes to this. Understand, are you being manipulated? Know the types of lures they're going to use. There's almost always a sense of urgency because they don't want you to do that, but any of these other ones mixed together can go quite a way. So it's important to understand, where can I be distracted? If there's a shiny light over here, am I going to stare at that, right? Anyone ever, I don't know if you have a dog or a cat and a little laser, right? You point that on the ground, and next thing you know, they've forgotten about everything else that's going around them. That's the kind of stuff that these bad guys are trying to do for you. Now, when it comes to the end users and training them, that's a key part of this, is helping them understand where these sorts of things are coming from, but a lot of people make the mistake of trying to make users extremely technical or at least partially technical, looking at email headers, things like that. That's really not where you want your accounting people or your marketing people to be. What you really want them doing is seeing these things, spotting them, and then moving them on. So what we do, we have about 22 red flags. This PDF is available on our website at knowbefore.com, actually. And basically what it boils down to is when you train your users, teach them the emotional trigger that I just talked about. Show them that, you know what, if I get an email at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday from my HR department and that's unusual, maybe I should take a close look at this or report it to somebody that can take a look at it as well. That's a key point. You have them report it to people that can look at the headers. But really, when you're looking at these things, you just want to trigger these red flags, let them get it out of their inbox to somebody else, and then let them deal with it, right? Let the trained people deal with that other piece of it. So this is where I see a lot of people trip up. They get excited, and then they do something without applying this sort of thing. This really drives you back more to the critical thinking steps than anything else. Again, one of the best defenses is critical thinking. Now, people think that you can't train users. I'm here to tell you that's not true at all. This is 6 million users, 11,000 organizations. We did this study, tracked them for a year, and initial click rates, believe it or not, 27% average click rate on phishing emails, right? And 13% after 3 months. Now, that's pretty good. You're dropping your risk in half. But if you stop there, it goes right back up. So it has to be a continuous program of training. So basically, what you do is you do simulated phishing attacks at least once a month and continue to train them. I like to see it at least quarterly, just on the latest scams that are coming up, right? As you come into first quarter, hey, watch out for tax scams. Watch out for this. As you're going into the fourth quarter, beware of holiday scams. Anytime something comes out, if there's a major issue, like hurricanes or storms or natural disasters, there's always this scam. So have something there that's ready to send out to folks when that happens. It says, hey, be careful who you're sending your money to. These are very key things when it comes to that, and really makes a big difference on how the people continue to react. So what we like to do, it's a 4-step training process. If you use us, great. If you don't, these also apply. Get a baseline. We can help you with that on our website, knowbefore.com. It's free. We can do some simulated phishing, get some information there, let you know how bad it is. Then what you do is you train your users, and then you fish your users. Now, using the baseline, if you get like a 30% or higher click rate, you don't want to start them off phishing with the tough stuff. That's important. Build their confidence with some easy ones, right? The Nigerian prince scam, something like that they go, oh, okay. So they catch it, they build confidence, and then as you measure the results and keep doing the phishing as they get better, turn it back around and give them a little bit more, hey guys, you're doing so great now, we're going to make these a little bit tougher, but you're doing awesome. So you're building their confidence, making them feel better about what they're doing. This is 4 steps that make a huge, huge difference in how your people deal with these kind of threats coming in through phishing, through other social engineering. They get the phone calls, they get the text messages, whatever it is. All these different scams are greatly reduced through the user training piece. And unfortunately, that's a part where a lot of organizations still forget to put some effort. So that being said, I know it was super quick. Again, feel free to reach out to me. This is my contact information here, a couple Twitter accounts, my email. I'm always happy to help you with this. If you have any questions, I know that was very, very quick. So, David, how you doing? We got any questions here?
We do, Eric. Yeah, while we do some questions, I'm going to pop up this poll question that simply says, what additional information would you like about the KnowBe4 solution? And I'll just leave that up while we do some questions. First question that came, well, before I do the first question, I should say, there's a lot of great comments about your presentation, best presentation of the day, a few people said. James said we've been using KnowBe4 for 2 years, and it's very impactful for the company that KnowBe4 just gets it. And so lots of good feedback for KnowBe4 and your presentation. Let's see, first question that came in here, they're asking, do you believe the new threats in 2019 have and will require a lot of new user education and training?
I get questions about that a lot, like kind of how things are changing. Ultimately, when you look at these issues, most of them stay the same. I mean, the underlying attacks are the same. They may flavor it different ways. They may do that. But ultimately, it really boils down to, again, that emotional response. If you think about it, these scams have been around. A lot of these scams have been around for a long time. The Nigerian prince scam actually used to be a postal service scam. They used to have to put a stamp on things and mail them. And then what they did is it's really the digital revolution. The invent of email has made it so that they no longer have to spend money to do these scams, right? And so that really hasn't changed. And the same thing has been going on for years and years. Now, I think that everybody needs a basic training on what's going on and kind of the refreshers. As much as anything else, I think it's a reminder of, like I mentioned, going into the first quarter. Hey, people are going to be doing tax stuff this time. Keep an eye open for these attacks on the tax-based stuff. Fourth quarter, again, we're talking about the holiday scams. We're talking about those sorts of things. So I think the basic training is the same, which is look out for these sorts of things, look out for things that have urgency, keep an eye on those red flags. I mean, those don't really change. And then you just kind of update it with some relevant stuff so they're thinking in that mindset at those specific times. Kind of a long answer, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and do you think the rate of attack is increasing?
Actually, yeah, I do. I mean, it seems like so many more attacks are going on, and I think they're becoming more efficient with how they're sending the messages. They're becoming more organized, right? I like to tell people this isn't a bunch of kids in the basement eating pizza, drinking Mountain Dew, right? This is organized crime. This is sometimes nation states. This is large-scale groups that have treated this like a business. So they've gotten a lot better and a lot faster at gathering and aggregating data. That's always pretty amazing how they do that, and then using that in an automated fashion to really target people with emails. And the more breaches we have, the more often this happens, the worse it's going to be and the faster they're going to be able to react. Like I heard just before we came on here that there was actually a breach in at least one of the license plate databases, which is going to be great information for these attackers now to be able to pull stuff from that. Every time we see one of those sorts of attacks or breaches, they're able to gather more metadata and more data, and now they're applying AI to things to make these attacks more believable and let your guard down. It's amazing how the sheer number of attacks has really, really risen.
Yeah, scary times for anyone running an IT organization and trying to protect end users. This is a good question here from Adam. He said it's inevitable that a company is going to get hit with something, so you absolutely need a recovery solution of some kind. But how can you any recommendation on helping them justify security awareness or security education for their company? What do you recommend, Eric?
The fact is, okay, no security control is 100% effective. It never has been. It honestly never will be. We got to be honest about that, right? So we know that email gateways are out there, and they're great. They drop some of that sheer volume down, but some are going to get through. We know that best of breed still passes about 10 to 15%. You're going to get all that stuff. The user is going to get them. Hopefully, if your click rate reduced from 27% to 2%, you're going to be dealing with this a lot less often. But yeah, you need endpoint protection, good endpoint protection in place. You need good backups in place to be able to restore from. All of that is a piece to this. So you have to build it out as this layered approach. That's just how this sort of thing works. Now, the key part is, and I like to think about it this way, your users are really where things pivot from being proactive to reactive. So you have an email gateway out there. It's trying to block all of these emails coming in, right? And great, wonderful. All of that stuff happens. Once a user gets the email and takes an action or, say, clicks a link, well, now you're in a defensive posture. So you're hoping your endpoint protection catches it. You're hoping something out there, catches a command and control channel. You're hoping some of that sort of stuff happens and will respond to it, or you're hoping that your backups are good and you can restore from it. Now, the thing about that is that pivot point where you go from being proactive to being reactive is in the user's seat. And so it's a key part of this. We have to understand that and make sure that we get, leadership to understand how much that is. And that people are going to make mistakes, but if you can reduce that by, 90%, you're going to have a much better day and probably be reloading a lot less machines. I know I used to have to reload a lot of machines due to malware infections from users clicking, and I greatly reduced that once I tackled the human part of things.
Yeah, you make a great point there. I mean, I kind of compare it to driving a car. I mean, you absolutely need insurance if you do get in a wreck, because that might happen at some point. But I mean, if you could drive defensively and reduce the odds of getting in an accident by 90%, well, you should do it, right? And I kind of equate that to security awareness and user education. I don't know if that's a fair comparison or not, but it's one that sinks in for me. Eric, I think that's all the time we have really in the event today, but really great presentation. We got tons of great feedback, tons of great comments coming in for KnowBe4. So thank you so much for being on the event today, Eric.
Hey, I'm always happy to be here, and like I said, I'm always open to chat with people and help them understand this. I really honestly believe this is one of the most important things we can do in our organizations is deal with this part right here. I really do. So thank you all for the nice comments. I appreciate it.
For more information, of course, visit knowbe4.com. They've got tons of free resources on their website, and you can learn more about security awareness and better protect you and your company. And with that, it's time for our final prize giveaway on today's ATM Virtual Summit. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Frankie Cates from California. Congratulations, Frankie Cates from California. And our final grand prize, a MacBook Air, going to Leonard Forzati from Massachusetts. Leonard Forzati from Massachusetts. If you didn't win, I'm sorry. Best of luck on our next event, which, by the way, we do have coming up very soon. You can find information on all of our events at events.actualtechmedia.com. If you are interested in potentially sponsoring one of our events, visit or just email us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I hope to see you on our next event, which is June 5th. It's the Storage, Flash, and NVMe EcoCast event. We have some really cool presenters lined up for that already and some great prizes to give away. So I hope to see you on that event. Thank you, everyone who took time out of your day to join us on today's virtual summit. I hope that you learned a lot and really enjoyed the event, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.